Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. First of all, approval of the agenda. Any additional items for the agenda? Any amendments?
There are some on-table items in your package. Notice 3.3 has 4 items, A, B, C, and D. And just make note that item 3.3C is the revised copy of the bylaw. 3.4 has 2 on-table items. 3.5 has 1 on-table item. And there's 1 information item, 12.14, at the end of your package.
Okey-dokey. Sir, motion to approve agenda, seconded, all in favor, passed unanimously. Okay, public comments. What have we got tonight?
First up, we have Mr. John Allen, please.
Hello. Good evening, Mr. Gower. Please have a seat.
Thank
Join
you.
us.
It's not easy appearing before you tonight. Number one, I'm not well prepared. I have,
Never admit to that.
You can fake it now.
well, I'm here to talk about the business bylaw, business licensing bylaw that's been proposed. And I have a number of concerns about it, as you may or may not be aware. A lot of them have to do with the implementation of the thing itself. One thing that I have a big concern about is this definition of a business here. When I asked about it to one council member, I was told that the difference between a self-employed person, which is what I consider myself to be, a guy in a room with a computer, not really a threat, and a person doing work at home for another employer, like one employer only. At the time, I was being told that I was a business and I would pay to be licensed, and the other person was not a business and would not pay. When I look at the definition here, I see business means the carrying on of an undertaking of any kind or nature for the purposes of gain or profit. So there's no mention of how I pay my taxes. There's no mention of how old or young I may be. There's no mention even of money. So this actually applies to people harvesting vegetables out of their garden, even at their table. And it seems to me, if you're going to pass something like this, there should be some due diligence on something like this. This to me, it's like somebody, well, let's not get into analogies, it's a waste of your time. I feel that you should pull this item out of the consent agenda for one thing. I think bundling it with other topics and moving it through in that way reminds me too much of processes I've seen elsewhere in the world where it appears deceptive. I don't believe that that's what they're doing, but it makes me really uncomfortable when things get mixed together in this way and voted on at a stroke rather than discussed independently. I'm very concerned that this bylaw will lead to growth of cost. And when you talk about a $100 fee for this and a $25 fee for that, $100 for the top earners on this island is like pocket change. And for people getting started, it can be a bigger deal. But beyond that, costs go up. This is a proposed half-time position, and how many people in this room believe it will remain a half-time position, honestly believe that. I think it's going to double. And I think we've seen in other jurisdictions much higher costs for business licensing. And again, any kind of gain or profit, so it then comes down to somebody, I don't know who it's going to be, if it's in this room or a half-time position, deciding who to target for these things. The benefit proposed is data, which I would give freely. But if I'm walking along with some flowers that I picked from my garden, and you come up to me and say, hey, could I have a flower? I'll give you that flower. If you rip it out of my hands and say, that'll be $25, that changes our relationship considerably. It makes me less of a participant in my community and more of a recipient of the power on high. And this leads to my further concern that I have great respect and affection for everybody here. And so it makes me feel bad to say things that sound like accusations. And I think the same thing would happen to me. After 4 years of being in government, it might be tempting to relate more as the power than as the citizen. And you might start thinking as the one who administers laws a little bit less than a representative of the people who are on the receiving end of penalties, threats. So I think what we have here is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your idea of social license. I can't identify very much support for this. I put out a discussion on Facebook today, which was negative. I framed it with, the beginning of it was specifically this definition: business means the carrying on of an undertaking of any kind or nature for purposes of gain or profit. And it was a long thing. Last time I came here, I lifted up some papers and I was sanctioned for that, so I won't lift up this paper. But, you know, I've got like 6 pages of comments that people made, and I actually later in the day sent an invitation to you to join, but I think it was late in the day, and I understand why you didn't participate. But I think you've heard a lot of negatives. I don't think you've heard a lot of positives. Like in this thread, there were 2 people who said positive things about it. When I came to the open house here, there wasn't a single councillor present. And the people who were there were 2 people who supported it, one that I talked to. One was on the EDC and one was a business person in the area. So I would actually challenge you, before you pass this, to show public acceptance for it. To show us what you mean when you're talking about public engagement in public, when you're running for a new election. And to convince me as a citizen that you actually still identify with the citizens and not simply as the ones who enforce laws and create new penalties and make it a more stressful world for me, because, you know, there are so many other regulations coming down the pipe. Soon somebody's going to be out there with a ruler and measuring the distance between the cars. So I have to worry if I pull a U-turn, if I park too far away from a car, if I don't pay for a license that I have no reason to pay for. It's not the amount, $25. It's the principle that you want me to ask you for permission to work, to be self-employed. Why should I ask your permission? I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm not a hazard to anybody. I'm willing to participate in data. But this is telling me that I don't have that choice. And when the public engagement happens, it's a little bit like driving along Bowen Island. We're a community that doesn't even lock its doors. And now we're worrying about our neighbors. We need more bylaws to make sure that our neighbor isn't mixing explosives or selling guns. If I was worried about those things, I would lock my door, I'd get security cameras, then I'd come to you and say, we have a problem. Nobody has come to you. Well, I don't know who's come to you, but I have never seen an emergency on this island that requires a new tax for the rest of my life, every year, $125. One for my wife who has a child care work. She's already regulated by Coastal Health. And now we're going to have an open-ended bylaw control system into which any number of new regulations and requirements can be poured. Regulations that might require her to prove to this body that that body is regulating us. She's got enough on her plate. She is often at her wit's end, just trying to keep her business running. She prepares all night, works all day. Yeah, thank you. So my conclusion is that I do ask you not to pass this bylaw before the election, to take it out of the consent agenda, so if you decide to vote on it tonight, people can see how each person reasons about this decision. And to remember that this is actually a demonstration of what public engagement means to you. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
And again, my love and respect, but
We got to you that time.
okay. Yeah, I feel good.
Next up, we have Ms. Barbara Wilshire.
For those of you who don't know me, I think most of you do, I published the phone book and have done that for over 30 years. So I have some very specific knowledge and feelings about a business tax. My first point would be, this was the first book over 30 years ago. There's a lovely young picture of Wolfgang Duntz. Everybody wants to look at that. There's a map that includes no Artisan Square, no Kate's Corner, no nothing. There were under 100 businesses. The book was less than 30 pages. You were around when I did this one. Yeah. The book now is over 100 pages. My last database showed 450 separate entries, sometimes the same people. Sometimes, and I won't mention any of them because maybe they'll only go under the radar this year. Already people are hinting that to me. I believe my book's going to take a hit in 2019 because of the business tax. I believe people may not want that in their life. It might have been John. I went through this book today and crammed out clients that I think will not renew advertising, and there were a lot. I have no way to prove that yet. I'm just saying, it's having a very chilling effect on my business. Cottage business, cottage industries, whatever you want to call them, the non-storefronts that maybe don't want to pay this tax, and it will go back to a word-of-mouth situation. People who do not want to pay the tax will be worse off than this book. This is not a very complete publication, because it was just the beginning of the whole thing. This is a pretty complete publication, with businesses and everything included. My second thought on this is you're doing something by hiring somebody to quantify businesses. You're creating a redundant product. This product has already been worked on for 30 years. Why would you spend the money, taxpayers' money, and create a redundant product? It doesn't make any sense to me. The third thing that I'm a little concerned about is the gap between when you license people and you do whatever you do to assess their credibility. Say you are licensing contractors, I'm not so sure they're going to sign up. Daycare people, health providers. If you make a list from municipal council saying, here's our contractors, here's the doctors, here's this, here's that, I believe that has the aura of endorsement. That you're saying that maybe this is not a crappy contractor because we have them on our list. This is not a crappy healthcare giver. I'm a little worried about the gap in time when you license people, January 1st, whenever you decide to do it, and the time you do whatever you feel you need to do to make sure these businesses are legitimate. So I would ditto what John was saying, and there was a very active thread today on Facebook. I would suggest you go look at it. Yes, it's largely negative, but there are a lot of very good points. I know the horse is out of the barn, and I'm just running after it at this point, but I would hope you would consider putting this off until after the election. Tomorrow is advanced polling. I vote tomorrow, and I'm not clear where everybody really stands on this whole thing. So for me, it's imminent. I vote tomorrow. At the very least, I would think you could hold this off until after the election so that somebody can be accountable for something which is so indigenous to Bowen Island. It really is. I'm passionate about this product. I'm passionate about the businesses on this island, and I think you will be doing a bad thing. And I think it will have an extremely chilling effect. So thank you.
So 450 listings of
Separate listings.
non-residential?
You might have somebody, well, just that advertises in the white pages, maybe in the business directory
There's
itself.
450 advertisers.
Not different advertisers. There might be the person who does knife sharpening and
Okay,
and
but 450
Lot.
distinct.
distinct entries, monetary entries, 450, that's what my database shows.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Anything else anybody want to know?
Yes, anyone else? Thank you.
That is all for public comments.
Okay, consent agenda. What are we got? Hold today, folks. Looks like we're gonna have a longer agenda at the end of our agenda than they. Let me just flip to the last page here. Yes, Sue Ellen.
3.5, excuse me, 3.5 Cobb Bus Shelter.
Okay. Anything else? Yes, Allison?
3.4,
3.4 is.
what do you think? The dog, it's hard to sneak that one through.
There's no sneaking.
I'm not thinking,
It's just, we've had this discussion already several times.
but I can't vote against it if I don't vote. And now 3.6 really belongs with 7.2,
That's right.
which would be,
Yeah, 3.6 is pulled automatically.
okay.
Tyler, if you could just make a note of that for the minutes, that 3.6 has been dealt with through like 7.2, I think it is.
And 3.7.
Thank you.
Could I ask that we deal with that item fairly high up on the agenda, as we have tested the audience?
Oh,
3.7 is
3.7,
very
we're gonna
much.
chat about that
Yeah.
one. Okay, so, tell me where you'd like it. We've got Shauna.
We've got Shauna and Judy.
I would say after Sean and June.
Okay,
And
Judy's
we've got
with us.
Sam as well.
We have Sam as well, so I would suggest at the end of the agenda, I'm sorry. After 9.1.
Okay.
It was 3.7?
Yeah.
And what were the other ones again? Can you, somebody, I lost track.
What's being pulled?
I heard 3.5.
3.5,
3.4,
3.4, 3.7.
3.7.
Okay, I'm sorry, Melanie?
And I'll point, 2.3.
3.3. I'm on towards, oh, business license, I'm on towards. Okay, 3.3. I'll put them actually in numerical order at the back. So, yeah.
Where did you put 3.5?
It's right after,
There's Emma.
just after doc after.
Yes, Emma will be here, so I would suggest that we put her just in advance of tests.
Ah, okay.
Although she'll be here for the close meeting, so.
Oh,
Oh, it
okay, so
doesn't
it doesn't
matter.
matter.
No. Okay, sorry, so Melanie, anyone else then? Okay, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5 is what I have
Yeah.
at the end. Is that all of them? Oh, and then I've got 3.6 incorporated and 3.7 after 9.1. Is that all right?
Yeah.
That's her. Motion to accept and second, consent agenda seconded. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. We have no delegations this evening. And so we are moving along to staff report from Shawna.
Before we start, I'm just wondering if it would be appropriate, it's probably inappropriate if we have somebody whose birthday it is tonight, could we sing Shauna happy birthday?
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Shauna. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, thank you. Was that a yes? Yes. This is going to be hard to follow that up, actually. Thank you very much. So we are here this evening to talk about the public art program and policy and recommend that council adopt the public art program and policy. The intent of the program is to give guidance and incorporate a community-based process for the integration of artwork into public spaces throughout Bowen Island. The policy is intended to provide a clear, consistent framework for decision-making and for implementation of a public art program on public lands. Public art is a significant tool for promoting the cultural vibrancy of Bowen Island, and the purpose of this program is to provide access to art in public places for all residents and visitors, enhance Bowen Island's desirability as a community by creating appealing environments in which to live, work, and play, honor, preserve, and encourage cultural heritage and artistic diversity, promote civic identity through awareness and prevention of the community's preservation, of the community's history and culture, and also to support effective community planning, economic development, and cultural tourism opportunities. And I'm just going to remind you why we're here at this time with this policy and program. I'm sure, as you all know, you adopted the revised cultural master plan back about just over a year ago. And a top priority of that plan was, or is, the development of a public art policy program and to follow with implementation. Previous to that presentation, we had come to council in May of last year to present a draft document. And at that time, council received that presentation and had quite a bit of feedback and input on it, and as well as they referred the draft to staff. So the things that were identified at that time, and this came from your minutes, that there was
concern around the definition of public art, and needed to be more consistent with Bowen Island and our size community. The reference to funding was requested that it be much more clear, and the definition required for public art fund, we referenced that, it didn't clarify exactly what that would be. And then the funding model and implications, there was some issue around that, and at the time, we were proposing that part of the revenues raised would be through applying development amenity fees, which is commonly done in other municipalities, but it was not exactly palatable, that's what we heard at least, and actually further research with other smaller communities has said that although they've proposed the same thing, and in some cases have adopted that policy, when it comes to implementing it, there has been other issues of priority, which include things like bargaining, affordable housing, so that it's not actually been an effective tool. So you'll see that that is no longer in this draft. So we went back to not to the drawing board, but we went back with this feedback and input, and also staff, BIM staff was asked to take a look at it. And we referred back to some other of the other communities, comparator communities that were identified, and we checked in with the town of Gibson, Sechelt, and Tofino. And we also looked at the Public Arts Toolkit, which is provided by the Creative City Network of Canada. And staff, one of the other things we heard is that we wanted to ensure that this policy was integrated with and reflected those other policies and plans that the municipality has adopted and established. So we took some time to do that as well. There was also, this came from staff noticing that there was no reference to community art projects. So based on that feedback and further research, we restructured the draft and incorporated some significant changes. And they included primarily the funding model for the art, so that's very specific. Inclusion of reference to BIM plans and policies, so looking at the transportation master plan, the parks plan, the recreational plan for synergies. And we also added a section concerning the community community art projects, and then also talking more about communication and engagement as we go through towards implementation of this policy and program. So this draft then was, again, we were working closely with staff, a couple of different versions that came through, also reviewed by senior staff of BIM. And this is the iteration that you're now seeing in front of you. And we feel very confident this is a very strong document that will lead the municipality forward as we embrace more public art projects and look towards having that tool.
Financial implications. So the policy does recommend the establishment of a public art reserve fund with an annual contribution to be funded from taxation of $10,000. The policy also proposes an annual operating budget of $2,500, which would cover administration of the Public Art Advisory Committee and ongoing maintenance. The policy does say that BIM, for the artwork that comes into BIM, BIM would be responsible for ongoing maintenance of those projects. The operating budget also would be funded from property taxation revenue.
So I'm hoping you've had an opportunity to take a look at the revised draft. There's a fair amount of different sections have addressed, as they say, the concerns that were raised and the feedback that we heard. And we talk about, once it has been established and once it's adopted by council, we outlined some of the short and midterm priorities. And of course, the first step would be to establish a public art advisory committee. And we believe these, the terms of reference reflect typical terms of reference for a committee of BIM. And their role would be to develop and implement these best practices in the management of a public art program. And that would certainly ensure that they reflect the culture and environment of our community. We would like to create a public art inventory the Arts Council has done a draft of this working with community schools, some other groups and organizations, so it's in draft form now. It needs to be updated, but that could be over a period of time, whether with volunteers, possibly taking on that role. There's also funding opportunities to put together a more formal inventory. But it's important for you to have that knowledge of your asset, as these are public art pieces that are in some cases already owned by BIM, but and the new ones that would be acquired would be, of course, an asset of BIM.
Okay.
So if there's any questions anybody has, we'd be happy to.
I do, and I apologize to both of you for the time and to Raj, because I know this has been reviewed. But I have some concerns, and I would recommend the deletion of section 4, policy and program administration out of the policy. Because what it does say right now is, excuse me, council shall approve each purchase, commission, donation, or temporary display upon the recommendation of the Public Arts Advisory Council. If you read that as a policy, it reads that council is fettered and that they have to. This is not something we would normally put in a policy format. I would suggest removal of section 4, and I wasn't sure if the terms of reference were appendice to the policy or if it was just an appendice to the report.
I believe it was intended as appendice to the policy.
Okay, we should not have terms of references as an appendice to a policy. If I think what we can do is bring forward the terms of reference to a separate meeting for adoption. So certainly my recommendation, and other than that, it's an amazing policy, you guys. But I would suggest that the policy be adopted without section 4 and without appendice A, is it? Yeah.
In terms of reference, appendix A. To be dealt with it separately.
I would, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Maureen and then Sue Ellen and then Alice.
I wonder if the issue would be resolved by simply revising the issue with section 4.1. I wonder if it would be resolved, Kathy, by revising the statement under municipal council to read, council has the authority to approve each purchase, etc. Because I do think that there is some value in having the roles and responsibilities of the 3 different bodies here, 4 different bodies articulated, and not having a statement of roles and responsibilities worries me. And I think the problem in that section really is with the fettering of municipal council, not with the roles and responsibilities of the other.
My problem with that is if you look at the detail that goes into the policy, that is what's normally dealt with through terms of reference. So I'm looking at the Public Arts Advisory Committee on the next page, and it's very specific as to what the duties are. If council at a future date decides to amend the terms of reference of the committee for whatever reason, we then have to amend the policy. The policy should just be an overarching umbrella.
Okay, fair enough.
Agreed.
So, just one more point.
Yeah.
I'm a wee bit leery about the funding statement, and I wonder if there needs to be a provision put in there that says something along the lines that it's subject to the annual budgetary process.
I would definitely support that, because again, otherwise we're
Section
generating.
is that one?
5.
It's under section
yeah.
5, and it's
Yeah.
also stated in the financial implications section of the report.
That was next on my list.
There we go.
Flexibility.
So would we put that as a 3rd paragraph?
We'll just add after subject to.
But both paragraphs, I think, need to be subject to the
Yes.
annual
Yeah.
budget, so.
So you're talking about the first and second paragraph under 5?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd say, and then both was subject to council approval.
our annual budget.
Because the second paragraph only says it will be incorporated into the annual budget process. Final decisions subject to council approval during such process. Yeah.
Wait till you get to mine.
So just to be clear, because I understand it, so you're saying that everything under 4.1 roles and responsibilities would be incorporated under the appendice.
It would
Terms of
become the
reference.
terms of reference,
Terms
it
of
would be
reference.
incorporated into the terms of reference. That appendix would be removed from the policy itself.
And
And then I can wordsmith the way outside the meeting.
Yes, outside the meeting where it's.
Okay, so what was the wording to go in 5?
I just,
Subject to council approval.
yes, during such process.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you for bringing this forward. It looks quite different from the one that we saw a year or so ago, so I appreciate the work that's gone into it. I had the same question about 4.1. I'm going, council shall. And then well, anyway, one of my questions is, I have several questions, so I'll ask them here. One of them is music part of this? Another one is, does this public art policy only affect municipal land, or does it affect public land like crown land and shorelines? And my third question is, I didn't see a mention of the Snug Cove design guidelines, which are based on heritage and the materials that are used in the buildings and things like that, and I wondered whether those were left out on purpose or whether there was a thought about that. So it's about music, like could we put a piano on the dock, or could there be a band shell with music in the summer? Crown lands and design guidelines.
So in terms of definition, we did under 2.4 our definitions of art. Public art is defined, and under this definition I would say, although it is maybe indoor, outdoor, permanent or impermanent demonstrations of art, it could be designed for celebratory and memorial purposes. So I think it's relatively broad. I don't think it actually contemplates the idea of having a musical performance per se, but if you, in terms of...
Oh, street pianos. I mean, I'm just wondering if it was only visual and sculptural art, or whether there was more.
Well, it says art is visual in the definition.
Yeah.
It does say street art and performances in the definition of community art project.
So the community art projects,
So-
they're separate, but yes, that, and the idea is that we would offer support through this policy for those type of events, but it would not necessarily be something you're acquiring or considering maintenance of.
Yeah, it just all seemed to be objects, and I was thinking, that's not always creative expression.
Right. Yeah, and I think for public art, generally they're more specific to visual and permanent, semi-permanent visual works of art.
Okay, well, you've showed me two places in there where there's some flexibility.
I think there is, especially
Yeah.
in the community arts project.
Yeah, I think I missed the community arts one, thank you. And about the crown lands, or is it only municipal land? Is that, I didn't find that.
We have no authority over crown lands.
No.
That was a question I had, the
But we should
definition of
definitely
public.
add that in.
Public lands is crown land,
Shorelines.
anything owned by the regional district, anything owned by the federal and provincial governments, that's all considered public land.
So I wondered if you wanted to say municipal lands, outside of road right-of-ways or...
Well, but you never know.
Yeah.
I mean, it might come up one day that the council of the day has agreement from the regional district to put a big statue in the corner of the park that happens to look out on the main road, and that's exactly where we'd like it, and they're pleased as punch.
Well,
So why limit the...
Well, partly because this is an encouraging, this is an invitation policy, and it directs the community to
Right.
produce and install public art. And I'm aware of a certain mammoth that's up
Right.
and leading people, you know, I'm not saying anything bad about the mammoth, but it is, lots of people are trekking up there. It's affecting patterns of use in the area. And I don't want the province to come to us and say, get your mammoth out of here, or whatever. I'm sorry to target the undoubtedly charming mammoth, which I haven't actually seen yet. And I've also seen in the regional park over the years, people put up different things. They put things up. little decorative things, all kinds of stuff, and they shouldn't do that without permission of the property owner, which is regional.
Yeah, we would definitely have to, if we wanted to put something on Crown land or regional district land, we would have to get their approval first to do it. It does say, and I get what you're saying, I agree, it says at the beginning under introduction that this policy does not apply to our private lands. All we have authority with our policies is over municipal lands. So, but I agree with what Simone was saying, but I don't think it needs to be embedded in the policy. I think if it came up, it would be a one-off where we would have to move into some sort of agreement.
Okay, that's great. I just wanted some response from
Yeah.
staff about
That's
that.
a good point.
And the third one is the Snug Cove design guidelines. Were they contemplated? Because they're about heritage and they're about materials that are used for buildings and things like that in the cove.
I do believe that BIM staff looked into that specifically and did not find any, and was not able to find any that referenced or that she felt was relevant to this policy.
Okay, I just didn't see it in the list of things that had been looked at. And who would that BIM staff have been? Or
Likely our planning staff.
Were the planners involved? That's great. Oh,
I would also say that the advisory design panel is set up to, is based on referrals from staff. So if there was, say, a development coming forward that had an arts component, then I would definitely say in the central area, that would go through the APC. No, sorry, ADP.
ADP.
Yeah.
Could we add the words design pan guidelines in here? Because a few years from now, I can imagine that.
The design guidelines for Snug Cove?
No, I don't want to add them. I want to say with reference, or that they should be, that a public art in the cove should have, somebody should consider the Snug Cove design guidelines.
They may change over the years, but we will always have some.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what the best place would be to.
All the advisory panels for that.
Part of the roles and responsibilities of BIM
Advisory
staff.
panel.
Which is the part we're pulling anyway.
I can just
So
step
as
in
long as
for a
we
minute.
can.
The design guidelines in the code do not contemplate public art.
Right.
They're not design guidelines for public art at all.
No.
It's for
Like the
buildings,
buildings.
it's for structures,
Yeah,
it's for
exterior
gardens
finishing
and
on the
plants.
building.
Well, can
But no, but what
I
I'm
just
getting at
mean-
is that the guidelines are quite restrictive if you're actually going to follow them. And I don't think
I
that
didn't
they
say
would be.
follow, I meant refer to. And make
May
it,
I ask why? Why you would request that? Why would you like any public art to be
Well-
referred to the design panel? I'm just not clear.
well, that the design guidelines be considered. For example, in the Cobb bus shelter that's coming up, it's going to be between, it's a, you know, the Cobb material, quite different from the old general store.
So does it restrict materials specifically? Does the advisory?
It can.
It can, yeah, like no sheet metal kind of thing.
So we have under section 2.5, partnering with municipal departments and other committees. But I'd suggest, it says it's not limited to, but if we add in the advisory design panel, it's just as appropriate.
Yep.
And I think saying advisory design panel will then encompass the Snug Cove design guidelines, because that's what they're all about.
Which part was this?
It is page 117 of the agenda package.
Little e on the third page.
Yeah. So finally, there are synergies that will arise between the work with the Public Arts Advisory Committee and various.
Perfect, yeah, no, that's fine. Okay,
So if
good,
we,
thank you. That's fine.
after Economic Development Committee, if we add in an advisory design panel.
And so I move.
Okay. Well, we're just going to go to Allison now.
Well, I just,
I think, I'm just quickly reading over my notes. This one question I think is for Raj. Everywhere we were talking about public art reserve fund, in the definition, should that have the word statutory in there? Because elsewhere I think it implies that it's going to be a statutory reserve fund. So set up by bylaw.
Yes, you could add the word there,
It's not,
if it's gonna be.
It just gives it a little more security that it's not gonna get, at a whim of a council motion, used for something else.
So, when of a council motion, they can repeal this policy.
Yeah, but if we've got money sitting in a statutory reserve fund, it's a little more difficult
It
to
is.
change a bylaw
Yes, it is.
than shuffle the peas around in a pod with a couple of motions. And I have the same questions about public. And I think the rest of my comments are all to do with format and typos.
Could we possibly just do a quick round circle just to find the changes that we anticipate? And just the process as well, so we can move this along.
Yeah, no, Allison, I think was the last, anyone else wish to
So
speak to this or question?
my only other question, I think, was to do with the insurance section. All public art owned by BIN through purchase, commission, and or donation is the property of BIN and is under the municipality's insurance policy, or is it or is insured by the municipality?
I would say insured by the municipality. I think we have an insurance policy.
Yeah, okay, that was more technical, but the question I raised is, what about somebody, I think there's contemplating of loans of public art in here. So would we require them to provide their own insurance if we're borrowing art from them?
I think we have to deal with this case by case basis, and I think that would be an exception.
Covered under the
Yeah.
agreement with the
Yeah.
person who's loaning.
If I may, I think the tradition is with loaned public art in any event. The person loaning the public art is the person who has to carry the insurance, not the person. That's normally the way it's done in just about everything that I've ever had to deal with loaned valuable items. Works of art being a classic example.
Okay, any other comments before we start figuring out what we're passing here?
So my other question was, is there any, if we're sort of agreeing with this in principle, to see a tidied up copy with and a separate terms of reference at the final council meeting?
So you're suggesting that it not be adopted tonight?
Yeah, just because of all the major changes that were made to it.
That's up to council. to
Yes, motion to defer?
How about
Would you like to
a
make a
motion
motion to defer?
that staff incorporate the changes as discussed at today's meeting and bring forward an amended policy in terms of reference to the October 22nd meeting for adoption?
Can I just ask, is that the only alternative we have? We've discussed, and I asked, just so we could go around this, if we have broadly based agreement in principle, and these are the changes we are going to make, and there's enough witnesses in the room to make sure we don't cheat. I think, I'm asking the question, is there another way we can just say, this is what we're going to do, and it will be brought up, and then we can approve it, rather than defer? Actually, in this way, we've agreed a cultural master plan. I take to heart the fact that this is kind of embedded and part of this. I don't actually like the word defer. I wonder if we could perhaps
Let's
just
change that word.
well, maybe not defer it, we could actually move it ahead.
Kathy did not have defer in her motion.
No, but
And I've got a bunch of typos.
Councillor Fast has a motion on the table to adopt as amended.
Oh, I didn't hear,
Yes.
yeah, she had
Yes.
made that, or second.
So it would be, and that would be that council adopt the public art policy, program and policy as amended, and the amendments are the removal of section 4
Correct.
in its entirety, and with the addition under both paragraphs on section 5, subject to council approval of such process. 6.2, change insurance policy to the municipality's insurance. And then we also have, under section 2.5E, the addition of the advisory design plan.
And the addition of the word statutory in front of reserved for the public.
Statutory reserve.
Yes, the addition of
Statutory,
statutory
yeah.
reserve in front of each
And
reserve.
then, is it acceptable to then do some typo corrections?
No.
After the
Let's
fact?
bring it back
You
to
and I-
final adoption.
Well, it's up to council to decide that. We have a motion on the table right now.
Motion to accept in principle or something and then come back.
No,
after
motion
that.
to adopt
To adopt.
with amendments that I just.
Yeah.
That council adopt the public art program and policy as amended.
Yeah,
And
second that.
with the addition of the amendment
With
of
the-
removing the terms of reference from
Correct.
the
Yes.
policy.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's moved and seconded. Any discussion then?
Did it
before I call
second?
question?
There
Yes,
wasn't
I
a
second
second.
it.
Yes. discussion before the question.
Could you just remind what you put in for funding, what the funding amendment was?
I think it was, you mean about the annual budget?
Yeah,
And
under 5, what the
five
amendment, what the
was,
proposed amendment was.
After each paragraph, subject to council approval of such process.
Process or expenditure through the annual budget process?
Well, we were just in the same sentence talking about what the process was, so I thought it was just a bit of
For the second paragraph.
It's so free to be back.
Well, there's nothing in paragraph 5.1, it says to ensure public art sources, on request for public art projects to be considered through the annual budget process, but there's nothing about the annual contribution of 10,000 or 2,500 being subject to the availability of funds and approved in the annual budget process.
Did we not say subject to annual budget
Okay, so
review?
where's that going to go?
After the dollars, try it out.
Right after each paragraph, I think.
Okay, are you following what Allison is saying? And
Yes.
this is agreeable, and does Tyler, do you think he's?
It's the same thing, I think, yeah.
He's got it.
Okay.
Yep.
Are we ready to vote on this? All in favor?
Yay.
Any opposed? It's passed unanimously.
Okay. And if I could just ask for one further council resolution, that staff be directed to bring forward the terms of reference for the committee to a future meeting.
Second.
Okay, so moved, seconded, all in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have 7.2 That's right.
Everybody's finding their spot.
Okay.
So you will recall that about 2 weeks ago, we, Council met as Committee of the Whole and looked at the proposals for the planning of Lot 3 of the community lands. And at that time, you, the Committee of the Whole took a look at, is this on?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. At the work that had been done by a working group of representatives from the Fire Hall Steering Committee, from the Bowen Island Health Center Foundation, our own staff, looking at how we could plan Lot 3 of the community lands to look at the layout, parcel sizes, parking efficiency, and just the general coordination of the development of the site, so that when we come forward with the subdivision, it will be done in a manner that is coordinated and works in the best interests of all of the various users of the site, and certainly of Bowen Island municipality in this. And I think that council was, or committee was quite pleased with the general layout. It was based on the principles that had been developed through a couple of workshops with those groups on August the 7th and the 28th to look at the desirability of coordinating uses on the site, and just flipping through them quickly, the need for the fire hall to be a standalone building with a separate access and have land for its expansion. A common access point for the other users, a pedestrian access through the site, and preference that the health center had to be sited on the property so that it could be near the park but also have visibility from Miller Road. So a number of options were explored, and we came forward with a proposal that is just on the screen now that shows the layout of the buildings and the access and so on. And at that time, council generally agreed to the overall siting and recommended that we go forward with one exception, and that was that the Committee of the Whole suggested that we proceed on the basis of the sketches, and the only thing is that we consider actually reducing the size of the site that would be leased to the Health Center Foundation, and that their part parking be put on municipal property rather than on a land that would be leased to them. So in order to make sure that everything kind of would function and we would have a big enough site, I put it back to the architect to have a look at what that would look like for them. And also, I had a couple of questions from our solicitor just to kind of talk about how that would work and make sure that that was something that would work out in everyone's interest and determine whether it was perhaps the best way to proceed. So I have a couple of options for you tonight just to kind of have a look at in terms of how we might go about this. And the first option, of course, was the first subdivision layout that was put together. So it showed a fire hall site of about almost an acre in size with about 200 feet of frontage on Miller Road. The medical center site was fairly sizable. It was about 0.6 of an acre, about 2.249 hectares, which was a little bigger than I think council initially wanted to take a look at. There would be a BIM lot that would provide for access on the walkway as well as a housing site for Birch. So that was the recommendation that was in front of council, or in front of committee of the whole in September. The architects for the Health Center Foundation took a look at the area that they would need. This would be a building of about 8,000 square feet with a bit of flexibility for potential future expansion. So they were able to take the site down to about 0.142 hectares or about 0.3 of an acre. And they could get the building to work on that amount of land. And the parking then could be located in the front of the building on the property that would all be owned in one large part by the municipality with a walkway through there, and that could function quite nicely. The two questions that came to mind were just the question of bylaw compliance. If the parking is on a different lot than the use that it serves. And currently, our parking bylaw says that the parking is to be on the same lot as the use that it serves. There are some exceptions within the village commercial zones for very specific uses such as office, restaurants, pubs, business services. So if we were to include health center in that, we'd probably have to change the bylaw to do that, which would be easy enough to do because we're doing a text amendment for that anyway. So I think that should be rolled into it if that's the way that we want to proceed. The other issue that I was just writing about a little bit was if the parking were to be on land that would be owned by the city and we're going through the subdivision process, how would council like that to look? Who would provide the parking, who build it, who maintain it, who do the landscaping, who do all of the site work? So in chatting with our solicitor about that and taking a look and thinking it through, if we were to do that, there are two options that are, I guess the two major options. One is that council could charge the Health Center Foundation the amount of, I think the going rate under the parking bylaw is $20,000 per space, and whether we wanted to do that or not is a question, but the council could take the money and go about, if you chose to do it, because even if you take the money, you don't have to build it, but you could take the money and build parking and have it as municipal parking and have it leased to them. That would be an imposition on the municipality to actually go about doing it, and I think there would be an obligation if the health center were there, that council would go about in an expeditious way to actually provide the parking. The other option that you could look at would be to actually have the developer or the Health Center Foundation do it as part of their development, and they would do it through a normal kind of works and services agreement. So where a developer normally does off-site services, they would, such as building roads and sidewalks and so on their site that are on land that the municipality owns, there would be a works and services agreement potentially. Normally, when we do those, we have the developers build them. We also have about 125% security through that process. So I think that if we are dealing with a nonprofit foundation, we have to be careful in terms of the optics of how we're treating the people who are actually coming in to build that facility on their behalf. So there would be the works and services agreement, there would be another separate lease agreement, which could be done, but it would probably not be quite as straightforward as just leasing them the land and having them do their own parking and landscaping and construction. So then the one first option would be to actually reduce the size of the medical center lot to just the actual amount that would be required for them to build the minimum amount of parking that they would need under the bylaw. So I think I was saying to Kathy earlier today, this would sort of be the Goldilocks option, that you don't want too much parking, you don't want too little parking, you want the just right amount of parking. So if you assumed that they were going to build a building ultimately to be about 10,000 square feet, which would need about 22 spaces, the extra 17 or so spaces really that were in that initial layout of the lot wouldn't be required. So the size of the lease could be reduced, and in doing so, and I'm not sure how well it shows up, but if you do have this joint access that takes you down into the Birch housing project, and then the driveway up into here to this, and have the parking for the health center in this location, it does free up a nice little site here for some other uses that I think, you know, and it gives some certainty as to another little parcel that could be considered for some other form of development that the municipality might want to think about later on. So in just following up on the report that went to the Committee of the Whole, I've just come forward with these options, and I would recommend the third option as my recommendation to you, but certainly in the report there you have the three options that you can choose from, and hopefully we will go forward with one of them.
Can I get you to shoot back to option 2 for me? I just like I've done some analysis of this thing, and so I'd like to. So what we had originally talked about, I think, was cutting it off here, so that this would be all we gave the medical center. What Dan,
the one over on the right, Mary.
Sorry?
If you go to the drawing on the right, it's already lined up.
Yeah. Okay. So this we had I think we had contemplated going across there. What Dan has done is pulled the lot out a little bit more. And what he's accomplished here is basically 11 parking spaces. So if we give him the lot out to here, they've got enough parking on their own site for 4,700 or something like that square foot building, which initially is probably more like it as far as the size that they need. If we retain ownership of all of this, right, we still have the option of the exits and entrances wherever we want them. But this then remains in the evenings, on the weekends, etc. If we include this as all medical center property, shoot forward 20 years in your mind, it's their parking lot. You know, there's signs up that say medical center parking lot, nobody else parks here. Now, and of course you don't want to totally restrict them. So if they have this 11 or 12 spaces along there, it gives them the ambulance, the loading zone, the emergency parking spots and so on that are theirs. They own, they maintain, or whatever. All of that stuff comes through in the lease agreement later. Who builds, who operates, who pays for it. But I do think that if we're projecting 20, 30 years into the future, Well, we definitely want people to be able to park in front of a medical clinic, the way we want them to be able to park in front of restaurants, stores, and everything else. It should remain municipal property and public parking. And as to what they pay for, don't pay for, all that sort of stuff, that's, I think, a separate issue than what we're looking at right now. If we give them enough, because we don't know how big the building is, right? I don't think we should be assuming a 10,000 square foot building today, but we can certainly assume a 4,000 to 5,000 square foot building and give them enough land to put that much parking on. That, I think, is the Goldilocks size. Maureen?
So what kind of assurances then can we give to the health center if they are anticipating that they're going to be building out, you know, optimistically to 8 or 10,000? If they are building the absolute minimum 11 spaces or whatever it is for the 4,000 odd, how do we leave the door open so that they can come back?
Well, we've got a parking lot right in front of their door. I mean, they can park on our land.
But they would be obligated if they built larger to meet the parking requirements.
Right,
So-
but we could provide them with the parking. That's what our whole parking policy is about. We don't have to charge them $20,000 a spot. We didn't charge that to the distillery, right? We didn't say, okay, we relieved the amount of parking needed and the cost per parking spot, right? So could do that in this case further in the future if they expanded as well. So.
Thank you. I appreciate knowing which one you recommended, because I didn't find it in the report. I was wondering. I like the idea of the 17 extra spaces that could be left in the block, so I guess it's option 3.
And Marie suggested option 4.
No, I'm suggesting
Option
2.
He's talking about option 2.
It's one of the recommended options.
Yeah, but anyway, I like the idea of keeping that chunk of potentially unneeded, and I say potentially, unneeded or at least not needed right away parking spaces together, because it could be used for a temporary use in the meantime until the health center expands to the 10,000 square feet or something like that. So maybe they could have an option, we could give them an option on it or something like that.
I think that dovetails with what Marie's saying.
Yeah, that's
I
what
think
I'm
option 2.
agreeing, yeah. Then the other thing for me I like about that is that it retains connectivity in the community lands across to the fire hall and all that. If for some reason, let's say 10 years from now, we want to put in a district heating something, geothermal energy something. You know, just so that everything, the options are still open with that piece of, with everything still being connected there. I like the flexibility that it gives us in the future. So that's my vote is.
Sorry, Allison first.
Well, I guess I was just trying to, so if they build 4,000 square feet, is it only 11 parking spots they need? And that sketch in option 2 gives them 11 parking spots?
Well, the reason that it was extended a little further out for the lease, and I was just chatting with him about that today, if you can't read it because it's in red and it's really tiny writing, but they've extended it out because this area is a potential future expansion. So at some point, the notion is that they would
But for
like
the
to leave it
initial
open
phase, there
to
is
take
enough.
it up to this property line if they had to, but that wouldn't be contemplated in the initial
phase.
Construction. I think the initial construction, I've heard various sizes, so I've heard 6, I've heard 8.
So they're okay with option 2?
You know, they want the land. I think that if we put the parking, if we are continuing concurrently with a bylaw for parking for medical clinics, so if we do that, we just have to figure out whatever amount of space they have, that we can find the parking either partly on their property and partly potentially on municipally owned property. And, you know, through whatever lease agreements we make, I think the municipality is in the driver's seat in this instance, because for both the medical clinic site and for any parking that we would enter into an agreement with, we would be entering into lease agreements that would hopefully be in the interest of both parties, but protect the municipality and.
If I could start. In just speaking in support of option 2, which gives the municipality more flexibility, if the medical clinic comes forward in a few years and says, we're expanding, we need more parking, we will have had a successful medical clinic. And we can't fetter future councils, but I would be shocked that any council of the day would not say, hey, we'll give you the parking you need for your expansion. I think that's something that can be worked out down the road, and with option 2, which is the one that came forward from the committee of the whole, I support that, as it does give council some flexibility right now.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, Michael, and then Gary.
Just curious to know, the medical centre themselves, have they expressed any strong opinions or strong thoughts or strong desire for any of the options, or within discussions you've had with them, do you sense that, from their point of view, remembering what we build today is merely the precursor of what will follow? What would their thoughts be if they were sitting where I'm sitting?
Well, I think they first had this lovely thought that if they only had to extend the services to the property lines, that would save them some money, but I explained to them that that wasn't the way things worked. They would still have to pay to get the services from where they are on the road to their building,
Okay.
even if it's across municipal property. So, but no, I mean, I think they are very, I think they're delighted that the municipality is entering into a lease agreement with them. I think that we're in very early days, and whatever happens here, whichever way it goes, we'll work it out. But, I just wanted to make sure the council was aware that if we do this, and I do agree that if it is phased in a smaller site or a smaller building as there initially, then we would work to certainly try to get as much parking on the property as we could and see where things went in a number of years. I think that we have very willing people to negotiate in good faith on both sides. Whatever it's worth.
Put it in covenant anyway. Yeah, I think that's nice. I think that's a reasonable balance. I think they don't need all that parking right now. We certainly need the parking in the cove. But I think going forward, I think the medical center should have some kind of an assurances that we will give them parking in the future.
You can't, because it's up to the council at the day. It's always up to the
Can it be put in a covenant or something?
No, for the lease agreement?
Yeah, the lease agreement, yeah.
Statement of intent?
Because you don't want them coming up against the wall where they can't expand because they don't have parking.
It could be embedded in the lease agreement, couldn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I was
I would say-
And that's something that would come
Yeah.
forward to council
Yeah.
for.
And council always has the option to enter into a development variance to reduce.
True that, yeah.
So,
Takes too long.
There's a lot of.
or to not
Takes too long.
put in the requirement in the first place.
Oh, well then, I'm going to move that the council receive this further report on lot 3 of the community lands as information and authorize staff to proceed with option 2.
Second that.
That would provide for reduced lot size for the health center while maintaining responsibility for construction and maintenance of the parking of the health center.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Okay, so it has been seconded. Any further discussion before I call the question? All in favor? Passed unanimously. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So, on to, are we jumping into, no, 3.6? Okay, so, community center report.
Yay.
Oh, what fun.
Sam Collins. Yeah, so we're here coming to council with the idea of going through to gate 4 approval. And I'm going to pass it over to Sam Collins and Shauna to read the report.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you.
So as Gary said, we're here looking at Gate 4 and wanted to talk about just a bit of an update on the project and the funding needs required to ensure that the project continues to progress at a rate with current deliverables and commitments, the grant application requirements, and the fundraising campaign. Just for a little bit of background, 2017 and 2018 municipal budgets allowed for $750,000 expenditure budget to be funded from the $1.2 million of reserve funds that were in the Recreation Investment Reserve and the Civic Facility Reserve. Council had established a gate process to have continual updates on the milestones in the project, the scope of work, budget, and timeline. We're here today with Gate 4, talking about Gate 4 and making some recommendations about current spending to the end of this year, as well as looking into next year to keep the project workflow on track. We have new information about the Investment in Canada Infrastructure Grant that is a part of the funding for this project. And it's anticipated to pay up to 73% of eligible costs for the project. The grant submission deadline is January 23rd, 2019. And we'll be putting forward some recommendations today that are designed to assist us in submitting a strong grant application and ensure that key deliverables can be achieved and noted in that grant application.
So I've prepared a report as well that's included in your meeting agenda and minutes. It's a summary of the project status to date, which is Gate 4. In May 14th, we're here at Gate 3, so just a reminder on those processes. Between Gate 3 and Gate 4, the team worked on developing the contract documents for the design of the facility to a 60% level of completion. Over the months that have just passed, like Shauna mentioned, we learned a little bit more about the Invest in Canada Infrastructure Program and specifically the community culture and recreation stream, which we're intending to apply for before the deadline in January of next year. The work as a summary level has slipped in schedule. We said we'd be here a month ago, we're here a month late. And the inputs we've received from the grant application process provides us new information on anticipated project timelines with respect to when we anticipate funds to be acknowledged from the provincial process. Those two things aside, in terms of slippage, there's been lots of good work done to date. The energy performance analysis of the detailed building design has been complete, and we've targeted the exact amount of greenhouse gas emissions that this building with its enhanced sustainable design would be reducing compared to a baseline building. We've completed an off-site traffic analysis and study for the intersection and driveway entrance of the community center. We've kicked off some First Nations engagement process and established means of connection with the Squamish First Nations. We've adopted with yourselves donor recognition and naming policy, and the fundraising campaign, which is currently underway. So there's a website for everyone to go make pledges and donate some money to. Like I mentioned, the 60% complete working drawings is a place and time where the details of the materials and methods of construction are in development. We took that information, provided it to a quantity surveyor, and completed a Class C level of cost estimate. This level of cost estimate is quite typically used in business case and grant application processes. So we do have good numbers in terms of what the detailed breakdown of construction costs currently are estimated at. As an update on the schedule process, we are on track with the development of the documents to submit a building permit application in October. The design team's poised to pending the approval of Gate 4 here today, to submit a building permit application at the end of the month. And with the grant application in December and the provincial government's acceptance of all materials by January, we'll be moving into next year for the bylaw readings, and we're anticipating the access to referendum funds in July or summer of 2019. The reminder of the process which we'd go through then would be, once we have that funding announced, we would be ready, shovel ready with the design documents to go to tender in the summer 2019, and we'd come back for Gate 6 once the tender is closed through a competitive bid process, which would be around October 2019, so about a year from now. This is the delay that I was mentioning at the beginning. A little bit out of our control, but it is the process which the project had always planned upon, which was funding this project through a grant process like investing in the Canada Infrastructure Program. Still maintaining those roughly 18 months construction and transition to operations where we're commissioning the facility. We'd be looking at having this project complete and operational by the summer of 2021. The financial implications of this process and the current report from our quantity surveyor, just a few numbers here for your information. It's all there in the documents. But at Gate 3, we're at about a $14 million building, and today we're here with a $14.5 million project. That's inclusive of consultant costs, construction costs, your general costs, your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, insurance, as well as your contingencies. We've managed to balance much of the budget by rebaselining and using contingencies to offset the escalating costs of the delay, because escalation does continue to be one of your biggest risk factors in terms of costs on the project and taking more time to implement construction. All that said, we now have some very detailed information in terms of what are eligible costs from the grant process. So the grant application is a 73% of eligible costs, and eligible costs for this project will include recreation portion of the facility and the public common spaces, as well as the performing arts or large multi-purpose room areas. So we did a breakdown of those eligible costs and anticipate that the anticipated funding from that program would be about $7.3 million, which is leaving the municipality and the fundraising committee to raise approximately $4 million for this project to see it move forward. The other funds, reference to our financial plan remain the same as previously reported, so there's still the debt with service payments of $2 million of value anticipated, and the $1.2 million of funding held in community center municipal reserves. And that's the funds we're currently drawing on that Shauna mentioned the $750,000 budget comes from. A lot of detail there, and I'm going over it pretty quickly, but you can ask questions. The process moving forward, we're looking to the recommendations, which are at the beginning of Shauna's report there, and so that we have brought to you 4 recommendations, 3 recommendations.
So the recommendations from the steering committee at this time are that council approve the community center select steering committee recommend that council authorize staff to apply for a building permit for the community center building. That the community center select steering committee recommend council approve the completion of Gate 4 of the community center project and proceed to Gate 5, and that council approve the expenditure in 2018 of $167,000 which is the remaining unspent portion of the previously authorized $750,000 project budget included in the 2018 financial plan. And for the third recommendation, that the Community Center Select Steering Committee recommend council approve the expenditure of the remaining of that 1.2 million of the $450,000 for fundraising, further project development, and to be funded from the Community Center Municipal Reserves included in the 2019 financial plan. These recommendations are all being put forward to keep the community center project moving forward. The project is at a key milestone in the timeline and requires funding to continue, ultimately improving the likelihood of a successful grant application, which will bring us into the funding for the $7.3 million provided for eligible costs by the province.
Our approach with this, these recommendations and the ask here to you today is largely due to maintaining the continuity of the process which we're in right now, which is partially complete contract documents so that we can prepare them to a place within this year, 2018, that makes the project shovel ready and ready for construction as soon as the grant is authorized by the provincial government. If we stop the project now at this point in time, there would be adverse effects on restarting the design process and the building at a later date, because there is multiple factors. One, the team would lose momentum. There is a new building code coming into play in December, so we would have to validate the design in terms of the building code that would be current at the time if we finish in 2019. And we believe that having a shovel-ready project in our grant application has merit and will see that our application is more successful. So those are some of the reasons why we're looking to continue on within 2018. And the work in 2019 is largely going to be the fundraising activities to get your $4 million. So the recommendation of moving that forward would be that the project is gaining this momentum within the community, and that the community is showing its support for the project, which is another criteria of the application.
Two questions. I think I know the answer to the first one. So my question had been, why are you applying for a building permit now? But that's to get ahead of the December 2018 coming in. Okay, and then the second question was, with the grant application, the culture and recreation stream, when would you anticipate getting a response? Do you know?
They loosely have said summer 2019.
6 months, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're playing a little bit by other people's playbooks, so we don't have a hard and fast date on that.
Can I ask you, do you have sufficient drawings now to get the building permit?
By the end of this month, we would have sufficient drawings to get the building permit.
Okay, and that's money that, the cost to get to that point is money we've already committed?
We've committed it, not spent it, and it's ineligible in terms of the grant application.
No, I appreciate that. But with the, if we didn't approve the next gate, we would still have enough money to get your building permit.
If you didn't approve the gate today, you wouldn't make a building permit application because there would be a month of work that wouldn't be funded.
Okay, so we don't have enough money to get to the building permit stage without approving this next gate 4.
True.
Okay, so that's the 167,000 that we need to get to building permit stage.
It would set you past building permit, but yes.
Okay.
I'd suggest flipping those recommendations in.
Oh, yeah.
You're applying for a building permit before you pay for it. But anyway,
Right. Oh, I see.
It's confusing.
okay. And then the further 450,000, how much of that is for the fundraising efforts, and how is that being expended?
The further, some of it will be for the fundraising. It's important to note that the fundraising efforts have their own budget, that the fundraising will be recouped, the fundraising costs. will be part of the funds raised. However, we do need some funding moving forward before we've been able to raise those funds.
Right.
So there will be fundraising events and media, social media. We've hired additional staff to help with the fundraising efforts. Those expenditures will be recouped through the fundraising
And
funds.
how much is that?
$328,000.
We're approving $328,000 of seed money towards fundraising. Yeah, basically.
Which will be recovered, be taken out of the fundraising.
Okay.
And that's over a year? You're anticipating the
328 is actually spread out over a 3-year budget. Yes.
So a portion of the 450 is the fundraising. It's not, the 328 is not all within that 450. So within the $450,000 cash flow, the scope of works that would be included would be works related to question and answers to the grant application process. A portion of it would be for fundraising efforts. A portion of it would be for backfilling BIM staff so that they can plan the ongoing operations and development of the project in terms of operationalizing the building once it's complete. And the fourth piece of scope would be for, there is a contingency allowance within our cash flow for unknown issues that may arise during the 6 months where the project is on a design hiatus, but needs to continue to move forward. So there's an allowance within our forecast that, and that $450,000 for the unknowns that may be required to be developed to administrate the project over those 6 months.
Okay. When we met at UBCM with the funding people, and they were stressing the sustainability and, the criteria for this, has anything been done, any changes made in our project to more carefully tailor it to the
bottom line.
the stuff that they're looking for?
I think UBCM was just very recent. And what I would say is, no, nothing's been done since UBCM because this project had some pretty clear objectives when it began to align with anticipated expectations of this grant process and of the community itself. So when it comes to the, there's lots of criteria in the grant application, but specifically speaking to your question about sustainability, we can report that compared to the nature of a building that would be similar to this community center and municipal hall that would be allowable to be built by building code, that we've applied 9 environmental conservation measures to the facility and done an energy model and analysis to show the variance and improvements that the project has done to make this a higher performing building than a standard building. So we are able to speak to those questions when they are asked in the grant application process, and we believe we have provided a design that already would be compliant to those expectations.
Okay, I won't get into the details on it. Fair enough. Any other questions?
Can I just ask, if I take the recommendation from that council approve the completion of gate 4, proceeding to gate 5, upon the completion of gate 4, just what are the funds committed to that as we move out of gate 4 into gate 5? It's like one of these Star Wars movies. As we move out into the next gate, how much money have we actually spent at that point in time?
Well, as of today, gate 4, our current payments to date are $593,000 approximately. I told this.
Yeah.
$583,000.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
And as far as pulling the municipal, after the UBCM meeting and them talking about the complexity us trying to put our municipal hall in the same building as the building that they were funding. I appreciate that you've got a quantity surveyor pull it out and it's great off in the thing. Have you thought about the idea of simply pulling it in its entirety from the grant application? Call it a building that costs $2 million less, call that a parking lot in front of the building, and look at the Performing Arts Center and so on as a freestanding structure? Or does that, the whole thing, I guess, has to be re-engineered if you were going to do that?
Yeah.
So you pay some
Essentially,
sort of-
from a grant application process, we are doing that. We're only presenting the costs of the community amenity space, and pulled out the municipal hall component. That being said, in the grant application process and questions, which are available online for everyone, there are a lot of great questions about the added benefits of your project to your community. And I think that we have language within the design of this facility that can speak to accessibility and inclusion and access youth and seniors to the municipal hall components that we will leverage as added value to the community of co-locating the three major components of the functional program.
And it's also not unusual to have combined buildings. They're used to getting grant applications for buildings that are.
No, I was just going by conversations with them,
Yeah.
their reluctance. Anyway.
Yeah, just to your point on sustainability, Murray, which is a good point. And maybe through the fundraising process and donor recognition, maybe somebody will come up with some money to look at other sustainable options that we haven't looked at, just through cost. Because of cost, and if somebody comes up with an idea and they want to put something in there, some solar panels or something, we'll certainly add those on.
Maureen?
I'd also mention, I was just checking, there is a new provincial government program on the horizon that should be coming out for net zero buildings, so that may be of some assistance. It's just not publicly available yet.
Any other questions for Sam or Sean?
You covered mine.
That's a good cool question.
Okay. Do we have a motion to adopt the recommendations as per the agenda?
Reordered.
Reordered, yeah. and
I would do them separately.
1 and 2 gets
Yeah.
changed.
Let's do them one at a time.
That's how it
Go for it. Who would like to make a motion?
Okay, I will move the council authorize staff to. what?
Next one.
Okay,
reordered.
yeah, reordered. The council approve the completion of Gate 4 of the community center project and proceeding Gate 5, and the council approve the expenditure in 2018 of $167,000, being the remaining unspent portion of the previously authorized $750,000 project budget included in the 2018 financial plan. Moved in, yeah.
Okay, any discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Okay, that's passed unanimously.
Nice. And the council authorized staff to apply for a building permit for the community center building.
Okay, and all in favor? And that is passed unanimously.
And the council approved the expenditure of $450,000 for fundraising or further project development between January and July 2019 to be funded from the community center municipal reserves, and that this is to be included in the 2019 financial plan.
Seconded? All in favor? Okay, and we have a trifecta. Okay, we're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Now, 3.7.
2.7, very jumping, very line.
Which one are we doing?
We're dealing with
Oh, yeah.
3.7, which is a very
Yes, we
long.
have-
Come on up, Tess.
We have Tess with us.
Tess, hello.
All I want to know is where does when does the sign go up that says if you break in line again, the mayor's gonna come and harass the hell out of you?
I don't think that one's been ordered yet.
It's too wordy.
Aren't we hiring as a ferry marshal?
Take my flag.
Yeah, there you go, yeah.
I'll take my flag.
You and Jewel.
Oh, there we go.
Anyway,
I,
who wanted this pulled?
Oh, I
Or
did.
It was pulled, yes, so, and what were your reasons?
Well, I guess I'm just, I'm just trying to understand the financial implications. So we're gonna pay, we paid $7,000 in 2017 in each of for ferry, for flagging, and BC Ferries paid for half of that, so we paid $3,500. And then we're gonna increase our staffing by a 0.1 FTE. So we're looking at paying $8,500. But I'm just, how many hours a week is a 0.1 FTE? My mind was getting mushy.
Not very much.
3.5.
not pretty limited.
How many?
3.5
Hours.
Hours a week,
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Tess.
how is that, and are they gonna, so that just means you're gonna hire somebody, or bylaw officer, you're gonna go down for the 7:30 ferry in the morning and that's it, or?
Well, that's in addition to the flaggers. So the flaggers are still there. This is in addition to that. And it is,
But the flaggers are there largely on special days, right? Not on
Exactly.
Monday to Fridays, 9 to 5, and all the locals that jump the queue and do the usual, and go for their.
So Allison,
coffee.
is your suggestion that 0.1 FTE is not?
Well, I guess I'm thinking we're just throwing good money after bad.
How would you like us to answer?
I think a 0.1 is the least amount you can commit.
Yeah,
Probably, yeah.
but I just don't know whether it's really,
It's a tenth
you
of a
know.
person.
It would have been a really good idea at 8 o'clock this morning, right? They were back
Yes.
up towards Artisan Square.
Oh, I know,
yes.
Even my wife got down there.
At 11
It was
o'clock.
Very much late, and it's the first day after a long weekend.
Yeah,
And there,
Yeah,
the
change the
road,
schedule.
and the road was blocked, right? And people did, and as my wife pointed out, she simply joined a lineup. She didn't see a sign that said no stopping beyond this point. If you don't have someone handing out tickets right at the end of the ferry lineup, you can't go back to the 8th person in line and give them a ticket,
okay,
because they
but
can't see a sign.
my case rests, would we have had somebody there today? We didn't have a flagger there today,
we didn't have a flagger there today.
so we
It wasn't part of
probably,
the schedule. It is part of next year's schedule. For Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving.
yes.
I always hate that.
so
Next
it
year.
sounds like next year's flagging budget may be more than $7,000.
It should be, it should be.
Yes.
I also, honestly, I think we have to look at our flagging options in the future
Thank you.
for next year.
Yep.
And the municipality being more involved from a communication perspective as well. So those are things that we are going to revisit. I would suggest, does the resolution include the dollar amount? I feel like I was cramming for a course today. but-
By the way, $25 for breaking into the ferry lineup is not enough money. I mean, if you figure how many times you're gonna get away with it for how many times you're gonna get caught, that's pretty cheap for not having to ever get in the back of the lineup. And I'm telling you, there are people on this island that think that way.
That's the first offense?
That's the first offense, and then it
Yeah, but until you get caught once, what the hell, just come down Gorman, turn right, and
And go
get
flying
into the
around
lineup,
full.
and you'll probably get away with it.
I think there's another aspect to setting out community expectations in a bylaw like this, and it says that this is direction for the community, or this is what the mayor thinks and the council think is the right way to behave. Or it sets a expectation and a standard. And I think in my experience with Bowen Municipality, it helps. It helped with off-road vehicles 15 years ago when you know, council made a statement. And I think this is making a statement, and I kind of like that it's when people get the first one, they're gonna get the $25 fine, and they'll go, oh, okay, this is either I didn't know, or I've always done it, or whatever, but they will, They were
I know,
the
until
first
they get
attempt.
that first time.
Well, everybody, there will always be people that try to break the rules, but I think this helps.
I'm sorry, did we get an answer to Allison's question about the
No,
point
but I
one?
agree with
So-
Allison.
So I'm just, like, how, if we were to approve point one, what does that look like in real life? Like what?
But
what would be?
you're not approving that, I was just
Okay.
rereading the
Yeah.
resolution, you're not
Yeah.
approving a dollar amount or an FTE there, and I do think that has to be revisited.
Thank you.
And it has to be, when this bylaw is brought forward, at that same time, we could do a more robust review of what sort of requirements there are
Okay.
to give some teeth to the bylaw
And it
for
could, and
enforcement.
staff would come back with a suggestion of what it would
Yeah.
take to actually be able to meaningfully
Absolutely.
introduce this.
Yes.
Especially the little red light on the scooter.
Yes.
I want that red light.
Yeah, right on.
No, we can't be talking about. What am I?
His retirement project.
We have somebody sitting up at the corner and they have a scooter or a golf cart with a red flashing light, so everybody thinking of butting into line will see the enforcement person and go zipping down and give them a ticket.
Well, I gotta say, we are saving some money when I read the report and having talked to Bob, and I think he's talked to you since then, is there are walkie-talkies or whatever they're called now available from Public Works, so we'll save the $1,400 there.
Yeah.
Well, we'll save about 800.
Okay.
Can I just have, firstly, in terms of the EFDs, I thought this point of a person frankly walking around is possibly humorous, and I think we would have to pass on that. Try to give, when we do this, discretion to people like this, so that they can, as the season develops, take what action is responsibly needed. They answer the council on a monthly basis, and I hope it's broad enough base that we're allowing them sufficient discretion. If it's obvious that something needs to be done, that they are not hamstrung by this, that's one. And could I just ask Tess, and this is one that worries me a little bit, all ferry traffic must enter the ferry line up behind the last vehicle in the ferry line. I mean, I kind of get what it's trying to do, but imagine a day that's not so busy, and some people, because they've had a doctor's appointment, they just happen to be parked up by the crossroads there, by the offices, just by the square up there, right? They just park there. And meanwhile, well, they're parked there. Meanwhile, the whole area, all the way down, because it's a quiet day, is empty. I mean, so the area in front of the snug and over here is just empty. And I'm concerned that for the practical implementation, all ferry traffic must enter the ferry line behind the last vehicle in the ferry line. I know the intention. I'm just a little bit concerned that how realistic is that? This is not a bylaw for all seasons. And I'm really concerned that are we giving you something then which is a nightmare for you to run on, and then you say, because it was just nobody down there. So somebody did turn right, and they can look up and see there's only 2 or 3 cars parked, so no one's going to be overloaded because of this preposterously, outrageously illegal action. And they're just going to go down, they're going to park outside the snug and everywhere else is clear. That point too worries me, because I just don't think, especially for the quieter times of the year, that really works quite as well, and it'll give you problems in terms of its implementation.
Can I answer that?
Sure, please.
So that was kind of the reason why we separated the ferry lineup from the parking in the ferry lane. So the ferry lineup is the vehicles that are intended to be to go on to the next ferry. You have to be parked, within the 24 inches of the car ahead, and for the purposes of catching the next available ferry. And all ferry traffic must enter behind the last car in the line. The odd car that is parked up by the square or something that is not part of the ferry line, that's the vehicle that's in contravention.
But are they in contravention if they parked there, went for their doctor's appointment, and then got in the car and got on the ferry?
Yes, because there's no stopping in the ferry lineup other than waiting for the next double ferry. You're not in the ferry lineup unless you're parked up to the next car. Other than that, it would be stopping in the ferry lineup.
But I think what Michael's talking about is somebody who's in the ferry lineup.
They're in the ferry lineup. They're just going up the hill.
Because of physical abilities and so forth, can't park down at the bottom,
walk up to their doctor's appointment or for the blood test at Life Labs and walk all the way back down to the bottom again.
Yeah,
So
so
they
that's the vehicle that would be in contravention, the one that's
Yeah.
not parking up against the other
So-
vehicles.
So.
So the ferry lineup
It's
is
an
still
enforcement.
level.
The trick is selective enforcement, period. If
Well-
you try to enforce this law like any other law that you're supposed to be trying to enforce 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you will get lynched at dawn, right? I mean, people will go crazy on you. If you only enforce it when you have heavy traffic going down to overloaded runs, people will appreciate it. I think it's just that simple. I don't think that pulling up to 24 inches in front is realistic or works 90% of the time, and I don't think we're going to change the culture of Bowen to make it work.
Maybe it should be a seasonal bylaw. I mean, I wasn't part of the initial discussions, but
I bring you back to my sign, which I have
Yeah.
proposed before.
But what Allison and Michael were saying was exactly what I heard with my parents, who have mobility issues.
Yeah,
And they
well-
live park by the clinic.
But I mean, what are we trying to achieve here? It's the lower cove below the intersection and all the problems that we have the problems with. It's not line jumping up top.
No, it's not.
It's up top too.
People come
How
down
can you line
and
jump
sneak
up there?
into the line.
Well, there's
Not
not
up
usually
top, because
spaces
those
up
are all
top,
packed in.
everybody usually tucks
I
in.
don't know, but I mean, if you can have somebody coming down the hill and just pull in anywhere. Or
Well, they can't pull in
There
because
was
there's
a
never
hole
any
in-
gaps up there.
well, there's been holes in the lineup. I think we had a famous case, there was a hole in the lineup just below the school where a guy saw the hole in the lineup, looked around and pulled in there and came down and got on the ferry and ended up in a huge hassle. So people will, if there's a hole in the lineup anywhere,
Unless we
if they're
enforce
not gonna follow the rules, they're gonna sneak into the hole.
So council isn't adopting the bylaw tonight. All it is directing staff to draft the bylaw to bring forward to a future date. I think hearing these concerns, and I do think this is a bigger subject than what's laid
Yeah,
out here.
we did have a public comment earlier about next year we'll be out measuring parking distances with a ruler.
Yeah, right.
I'd like them to have a in consideration. Test one is to make something that's not going to be hard or impossible for you to enforce but by the rules of common sense. And number two is to make sure that you have sufficient latitude to take a staffing decision based upon your experience and based upon a season of the year. I'd like to see that somehow incorporated.
I think part of it is embedding exceptions, as we do in other bylaws. An exception is maybe we have placards for people who, whether it's their mobility placard, that kind of thing. But I mean, that's something that we could embed into the bylaw.
Oh, it's getting complicated.
It is a
So put
complicated
Melanie
issue.
in then, Gary.
So we did talk about seasonality the last time this came, and there was a discussion that it would take time to implement the bylaw anyways, and that we'd probably be looking for implementation near the summer months, which would be a good time perhaps to test it out, so I think that would be a good time.
Yeah.
If we're still going on that timeline. Is that?
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm out of the loop
Just
with
because,
some things, yeah.
just because of staff resources, that it would likely, would take that long to be able to implement, and that would be a good timing to be able to bring in for the summer, and then we could see how it went for the
We need,
IT time.
we need Job. We need the wisdom of Job on this one. And I don't think any of us are quite up to the task right now. So we'll leave it to Tess.
Just one suggestion is just with, if you look at legal statutes, you look at regulations, they use the word normally. And if you modify that second clause with all ferry traffic must normally enter the ferry lineup behind the last vehicle in the ferry line, that gives discretion to the bylaw officer to recognize that, oh, this isn't quite the circumstance we were anticipating dealing with. And if it's perfectly appropriate to use in legal statutes terminology like normally or reasonably and so forth, then I don't see why that couldn't be used in this language as well.
It could be even in the bylaw itself at the discretion of the bylaw officer, and then there could be an internal policy checklist that goes through.
Because you don't want to
Just
fetter
tools,
Tess and her
Yeah.
staff by having to rigidly apply something.
And you can change must to should in number one.
Yep.
So there's nothing in here about a public information session and like giving it first reading and then throwing it out there for public input and comment, which,
Yeah. This is something that is likely not going to be brought forward to council till the new year. We're having a transition in bylaw services. We are having to teach staff and with Bonnie's departure, actually writing bylaws. So that would be part of, and I hate to go more on planning, but I think we need to get Daniel involved with this as well, with bylaw writing experience. And part of it would be when we bring the bylaw forward for first reading is public consultation. And what type of public consultation we
Yeah. I have to say I particularly like the word reasonably, because what it actually means, the dictionary definition is sensible standards of judgment. I can't think of a better way of putting it.
Well, like you say, these are just tools to be used at,
So
somebody's
key to
discretion.
embedding it in bylaw so there is some flexibility there.
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
And just one other thing, Marie.
Close.
Almost had it. Just one other thing, is anybody taking consideration the merchants on, down the street there? Like, there's a funny thing that happens around the Snug, and they generate a lot of their revenue from people stopping there.
Double parking, getting the coffee and leaving.
Yeah, yeah.
or parking.
I don't know whether we should
Or in
leave some
the
space in there.
break,
so
going
people
in,
can still
parking
do
and going in.
it.
for
But they
lunch.
could park across the street.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just a
Well,
consideration, I
except
don't know.
yeah, you don't want to get overloaded on Sunday afternoon because you
No,
didn't
yeah.
park in front of us.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry, we're going to Sue on, but we should wrap this up.
Yeah.
I haven't had a lot to say, but my experience with bylaws in parks and beaches and swimming pools and places where people recreate is you never want them to be overbearing. You don't want them to be a hassle or stress, because people are there to relax and have a good time. And I think we can probably do that here on Bowen Island. In parks, for example, all dogs must be on a leash. That's the rule, that's what it says on signs. They use their discretion, right? It helps them when there is a problem. They can hand a piece of rope or string to the person and say, put your dog on a leash.
Yep.
And then the problem is solved. It could be a health and safety problem. It could be a disturbing everybody in the area kind of problem, and I can see that there are some similarities. So I would like to, since we're only directing staff to create a bylaw, I would like to move that council direct staff to amend the Bowen Island Municipality Traffic and Use of Streets Bylaw 133/2005, Part 1 Traffic Control, to include a ferry lineup section, and in addition to the stopping and parking section with the following provisions. Do you want me to read it all?
No.
Okay. So we use the word, the must is replaced with should, and the word reasonably is inserted between must and
Or
enter. And
reasonably or normally?
It's normally, I think.
Normally.
Yeah, so I think number 2 would be all ferry traffic should normally enter.
Okay, should, all right. And then, so that's the bit about the ferry lineup, and then that's the bit about the parking. We'll do them one at a time.
Sure.
Okay.
Seconder on that one?
Second.
And any discussion before I call the question? All in favor? And that's passed.
You
Unanimous,
objected,
sure.
you objected to the amount of the fine, Marie.
Try again?
Well, that's in the next part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So did that pass unanimously?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I
I'll
wasn't
move,
speaking for you, Gary.
I'll
No,
move,
it's okay.
unless somebody
It's not
really
that
wants to.
important.
I'll move that council consider the fine schedule currently in effect under the Traffic and Use of Streets Bylaw, number 133, part 2005, Part 3, general provisions for a violation of any section in Part 1, traffic control, as follows. As written, I move that.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded. All
So
in
just,
favor? Oh,
I've
sorry.
got a question here. It says that council consider the fine schedule currently in effect, so we've already got this fine schedule in here, why do we need a fine schedule?
So we could look at it all together, and so that it was attached to this.
I mean,
Bylaw
do we
we're
need to
moving
pass these numbers, or?
No, if it's already embedded in the bylaw.
It's in the street and traffic
Yeah.
bylaw, but the provisions above are not part of that. Right, so they,
No, but once
Ferry
those
lineup.
provisions above are added to the street and traffic bylaw, these fines
It
will
would
apply.
be within part, under,
So we
it
don't,
would be under that.
we don't need to pass that recommendation.
And they word it in the same way.
As long as the first recommendation is passed,
Yeah.
which council
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, and then the third
It's
one,
only about-
that council authorized staff to renegotiate a 2019 cost share agreement with BC Ferries for ferry lineup flagging services and put forward adequate bylaw staffing and ferry lineup flagging services provisions as outlined in the financial implications section of this report as part of the 2019 budget process.
Could I just ask that we remove as outlined in the financial
Yes.
implications section of this report, and just say, as part of the 2019
Yeah.
Budget process.
Sure, thank you. Go on, and I agree, that's great, I move that.
And seconded, all in favor? And that's a done deal too. Okay, moving right along.
Thank you, Tess.
Yes, thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Dan.
So where are we now? Emma?
That is a good question.
We are now at 9.2,
Yes.
which is minutes of the Transportation Advisory Committee.
Oh, yeah.
We're at overloads and 1,350, well, kind of separate.
Do you want me to speak to this? Or,
Well, okay, yeah, who,
well,
where'd that?
both Melanie and I were there at September 25th, and we were hearing from people about the students, particularly the high school students who couldn't make school. They were left behind, so they were deprived of their right of an education. However you want to look at it, it was high school students standing there as the ferry moved away. And so the Transportation Advisory Committee were talking about it. We threw this out, I think I threw this out, and we brought it forward to council. And again, this morning, there were situations, I know Melanie has been more up on this than me, but you can see there's a little whereas above it, some duplication, but basically it's that council request. You can read it in the recommendation down there. It's basically that a water taxi leaving Sled Cove 10 minutes before the 7:30 a.m. or approximately. Ferry as was done in the 1990s, as Alison Morse pointed out to us by email, I think, or that BC Ferries increase the capacity of the 7:30 a.m. run from a Class B to a Class A license, which would also increase the ridership by 40 passengers so that everybody could get to work and to school on 7:30.
So that's a motion?
I'm moving that.
Okay, I'd like a seconder and then we'll go to.
Yeah,
discussion.
I just want to suggest a minor amendment, and that a letter be sent under the mayor's signature requesting BC Ferries.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And do we have a seconder for the motion? Okay, we do. So, discussion. I'll start with Melanie and work my way around.
Yeah, just another quick background on this, is the exact same issue that we brought up with the Ministry of Transportation. We flagged the same issue with the Ministry of Education, noting that we were just at the cusp. What's changed here is that we were operating under a Class A license for the summer. They were put us on a pilot to deal with our overloads. They then thought that they were monitoring the numbers and thought that we could cope with a Class B. But what is happening is we're getting these little fluctuations, so it's unpredictable, as it says, but that's what has changed from the summer to the fall, is that they converted us back to the Class B. And so there's no way now predicting when or not we will, just take over. So this is giving them two choices in order to mitigate the issue. So,
But one of those choices is just for a specific run, and if they put more staff on, they've got to put them on for a minimum 4-hour shift.
but that gives them the
Not my
opportunity,
problem.
they can choose what is more economical for them, but either way, it's a problem I guess we have to deal with. So it's just
All we're doing is that the mayor write a letter,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
Okay, can
So
we vote on the motion?
I don't understand the circumstances, why were the students late? Like, the students should have priority on that boarding, I would think.
Well,
Why?
But it
Well,
doesn't, but
they weren't there in time to get them.
But why weren't they there on time?
So
Was the
they,
bus late, or what happened in that sequence that?
Well, it's happened more than once.
so that, and that issue has been raised with both the bus drivers and with the school board, and now they are making sure that they are there at 7:20, and that is being made very clear that there should really be any differentiation about who gets on, but you need to be in there on time. And so Also, BC Ferries has communicated back to the school board that they'll be, as long as students are arriving by the bus or there by 7:20, they're guaranteed a ride, or passage. But what we're trying to do here is with the problem at the higher level, and just making sure that everybody gets to where they
Yeah.
need.
And this doesn't happen again next fall?
Yeah.
And that commuters,
But to answer your
Don't get
question, there
left
has
behind.
been a communication piece in saying that, no, you cannot be arriving at
Yeah.
7:22.
Expect to get on.
And expect, there is an onus to get there on time, so that part has been communicated.
The ferry has also been loading early.
Oh, okay.
Is it
Those
still
now-
7, they didn't change it from 7:30 to 7?
No,
It
but it's
loads
been
at
loading
7:30.
early.
Oh,
It
yeah,
comes
loads
early,
early, they
yeah.
load it right
So
away.
it's now
So it-
loading at 7:15.
yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's
boy.
loading.
So it's not so straightforward. And
But-
we thought that this would help. It's a small thing, and I don't know how it could hurt.
Yeah, it's great, but I think BC Ferry should provide the service. They should put,
Well, that's what we're.
Well,
Person on.
that's the letter, that's what the letter says.
I don't know why we
Provide
have
the
to write letters.
service.
Anyway, let's do it.
Okay, let's
Second?
vote on it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's moved, it's seconded, all in favor, it's passed unanimously.
Thank you.
yeah.
Would I be able to ask our BIMTAC members on council to help me draft a letter for the mayor's signature?
Sure, I don't care who writes it.
Sure. In fact,
Then I'll just change it.
Kathy, in the previous agenda, there was another, I did a whole report.
Okay.
So you can look at that.
And I
It'll have
think there's
most of
probably a
it in it.
similar one that's already gone already, like I think there's.
Yes.
If you guys don't
Yes.
mind sending those to me, then I can use that as a starting point.
Okay,
for the letter.
action item.
That's probably not
That's why I asked.
So, Mike.
So
Okay,
now we
we're
got
on
in-
to
No, not yet.
9.3.
We have,
9.3.
Oh, okay.
They are recommending,
Yeah, for the Emergency Program Executive Committee, we've come to a bit of a block there. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan hasn't been done since 2007. And we're running into situations where we can't get grants for anything that's emergency related if we don't update the CWPPS or whatever it is, PP.
okay, so we applied for the money.
So we just apply for the money,
So I'll move to the emergency program, where is it?
Executive
That
Committee.
the emergency support the emergency program coordinator applying for the UBCM Community Resiliency Investment Grant in order to update the 2007 Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
I second it.
Okay, all in favor, passed unanimously.
Second one was a recommendation from the Emergency Program Executive Committee that Bishop's Hill, so we had that power pole go down on Sunset, shut down the road for, I don't know, 6 or 8 hours, opened up Bishop's Hill, opened it up to automobile traffic, but it was very, very, very rough. A lot of cars couldn't make it up. So if you're gonna have an emergency entrance exit, and that's fine with the bar at the top and all the rest of it, but it's gotta be passable. So on this road maintenance that they're doing this year, there's a block of money left at the end for road maintenance, so they're gonna pick
Left?
things up. Yeah, there is. Well,
Well,
sorry.
it's for a program they're gonna defer until next year.
Oh, I thought they were looking for things to do.
No.
Um,
Can I just speak to this in that it's a fool's game? Because the top of that hill is gonna get washed out again,
yes, this is.
right? We're not gonna look at it for another 5 years.
None of us.
Someone's gonna come up to it 5 years from now and say, God, it looks like a riverbed. You say, yeah, it always looks like a riverbed.
That's why we put the gate there. We do this every 2 years.
Unless you're gonna properly ditch the road, because no traffic goes above those houses, right? I mean, there's no traffic up there at all. It's just a riverbed, and you only need it really to get out. You don't need to get in.
How do you know?
Well, why would you need to get in if you have an
Evacuate
emergency?
out of Seymour Bay.
We're gonna wait for the
Yeah, you
evacuation
evacuate,
point.
back.
Okay, so I'm not gonna beat this up. It says consider it, and if
Could I,
council's not willing
yeah,
to do it, that's
so
fine.
I spoke to Bob about this on Thursday.
Oh.
I don't think anybody talked to Bob about this.
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
No, but Bob has, yeah, it would be a good idea, because the issue is, as Murray said, it's the top of the hill. Bob is having some work done on the lower part of Bishop's Hill next
Correct.
week.
Yeah.
He is going to get them to do a estimate of what it would cost to do the upper part. But he is saying it's cost prohibitive, and that's why it was never paved in the first place.
Yeah.
But we will get an estimate. But I think to adopt this resolution, I would suggest that direct staff to report back with a cost estimate to make improvements to the top section of Bishop's Hill to facilitate emergency access in advance of the forthcoming. I think it probably would have been a good idea if Jen had talked about this, just saying.
Okay. Or I jumped the same.
Can I-
It was just, we just
I
threw it
was
out
at
there.
that meeting too, and I voted against this, partly because we were waiting for the evacuation plan, and we didn't have any information. It was something that was just so everybody knows. It wasn't like everybody on the committee wanted it to happen, and most of us weren't there. So,
I think if you, makes sense to me, when you have an evacuation plan, and we see what situations would require people to drive up the hill, not down.
get home. That's
Well,
not an
getting
emergency.
home isn't exactly, you don't build.
Anyway, we don't have to beat this up, we'll just drop it.
No, I think we, direct staff to report back to council on the cost for upgrading the top section of Bishop's Hill. But we don't want to lose it. I just,
Well,
There's nothing wrong
well, it
with
could be
doing the price.
wrong. It might not be a huge expense.
Okay, did you get that?
Cheaper?
I did, yes.
Okay, so moved? Seconded? All in favor? Okay, almost everybody.
Opposed.
Opposed to Sue Ellen.
just an extra.
Okay, 9.4.
And no one's offering driving lessons to get up the hill, because we got up there.
That's right, exactly.
Great.
Okay, we have the council adopt the amended communicating with the public policy. Now, I believe that the CAO has some problems with this, and I'm wondering if we could just defer that to another meeting.
I've got a whole list of questions.
I have problems with it? Especially communicating with the public? No.
It was
No.
the
Well, the public arts
art
policy that I
policy.
have problems with.
Well,
And, no, I meant that resolution about the
Oh,
efficiency.
that, okay, we've already.
I don't have any problems with the communication policy.
Oh, sorry, you do. Do you, Allison? Are they just questions or,
I don't know, I went through the red line version and made it a blue line version.
it's just given the hour and what we've got to cover? it,
I move that council adopt the amended communicating with the public policy.
Okay, a seconder?
Well, I wanted to ask before you moved that, that whether we could deal with this at the next meeting.
I would,
I would actually prefer to have it passed at
Well,
this
then, are
meeting.
you ready for my
if it's
15
possible.
minutes of questions?
Sure,
Okay.
go for it. No,
Just one
I'm
more
sorry,
word.
I mean, we
It's part of
spent,
our
we
business.
spent 3 months working on this. We can
I
try
know,
to take
and my
5
concern
minutes.
was, we really should be talking about something like this in a committee of the whole, so we can just have a.
We have one, we
general
did. This is
discussion.
just amending it, updating it.
I know, but.
Take your time.
Okay, communication tools. You've added any project-based branding should be consistent with the Bowen Island community brand. Is it the community brand or the community brand policy?
No, it's intentional there, the community brand.
Okay. Mayor's reports, we have done those for years, and it's got submitted to council, includes current activities. It was the practice of, when mayors did them in the past, to submit to the council prior to publication. So, submitted to council prior to publication is something I would like to see in there.
Okay, I don't object to that, and I'll draw your attention to the preamble, which says as part of communication plans, some or all of the following tools
Yeah.
may be used. So we were aware when revising this that
Yeah.
some of them were not in regular
Yeah.
use.
Okay, well, I guess I was thinking because we now have the island page, do we
Mhm.
still need the mayor's report?
Frankly, I think yes.
Okay.
And this just retains the option of regular mayor's reports.
Okay, telephone and voicemail. Okay, that was
Okay, and then correspondence did get moved to another part of the policy, right, because that was where this is dealt with.
Yeah.
Okay, so, in guidelines for correspondence from the public,
Where are you, Allison?
I'm in something called guidelines for correspondence from the public. Now, I'm reading from the red and green line version, because I want to see what was changed. There seems to be a little awl hanging out there at the end. I don't know if it made it into the final one or not, because I ran out of time to look at that.
So we'll delete that.
So down to the third bullet under B. Correspondence to mayor and council becomes a public record once it is placed on the meeting agenda. Personal information such as residential addresses or telephone numbers may be redacted. Well, who makes the decision as to whether it will be redacted or not?
The Freedom of Information Coordinator, who happens to be our communications coordinator.
Okay, so in some cases you don't redact an email address or a telephone?
No, say for a development variance permit or something where we have to have the address.
Okay, but this is correspondence.
But we could nonetheless receive correspondence on a development
Okay,
variance
all
permit.
right. Okay.
This was gone over really carefully by staff as to
Okay.
what was actually being done.
And then the committee chair is responsible for ensuring that correspondence to a committee has been reviewed by the committee. So that, this whole section just reads, how are communications from the public tracked? Do we have a communications log so that somebody knows, that follows up, that the chair has actually made, is on the agenda and the person's received a response?
Excuse me, I'm not sure. That is a good point, though. I can check with Sophie and Steph to make sure. I'm sure there is a process in place.
Yeah, because I couldn't see anything in here that said how we can track the correspondence to make sure that it had been responded
Yeah,
to.
and I would say that, I don't know if that is really, should be embedded in a policy or just internal operating procedures.
That's office procedures.
Yeah, but if we don't have one, I think we need one, so that's.
Yeah, I will check that out.
Okay. Now, this bit about using social media. Staff are encouraged to consult communications to make posts to municipal rather than using their personal accounts. Would we even want them using their personal accounts?
No, but it happens.
I know, so why are we saying rather than using, rather than?
Because then I can take this call, see if we can cross it back.
Okay, so basically, I was reading it as you were still letting them do it.
No.
Because it wasn't
That's not
saying
how I
they
read it.
must. It was, they're encouraged to consult, to make posts, and not use their personal accounts.
Yeah.
But you said, rather
What?
than using.
Why not have it shall only be?
Well,
Yeah.
because it's difficult. You can't preclude a staff person, especially if they're in a non-managerial position, from posting what sort of information that they would like to post on Facebook.
Somebody
It's
who
not
drives
about
a
censorship.
snowplow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a fine line of discretion, I would say, on my part to go, okay, you're a manager, it's not appropriate for you to comment on that bylaw amendment.
Oh, I
But,
see what
yeah.
you mean. Okay.
Certainly how I think it, I don't know if that was the intent.
Okay, I was reading that as meaning that all members of staff posted an information piece to the social media account. And they do it using their own personal accounts to say that Bishop's Hills Road's open, for example.
They don't use their personal accounts for
Okay,
that purpose.
alright.
There might be instances where a staff person might respond quickly in an emergency situation, but that's not the way this is being used.
Or a big snowfall when people have to make decisions.
So the next one is, the roles and responsibilities of the communications coordinator. It says monitor sites for inaccuracies and misinformation as resources permit. And then 2 bullets down says verify facts and data as resources commit. So we're monitoring outside sites, or we're verifying facts and data that are posted on our site? They almost seem to be the same thing. And it would make more sense if they were one after the other, rather than having branding and visual identities in the middle.
Fair enough.
And what about monitor sites for inaccuracies, misinformation, and verify facts and data?
Okay.
All in one bullet.
Yeah, it just seemed, either we were duplicating
Verifying
the same
facts and
instruction, or, yeah, okay. And then I'm down to H. Under social media sites may be used by the municipality for sharing communications produced by partners, stakeholders that are relevant to the citizens of Bowen Island. But under G, you've listed a whole bunch of stakeholders where you would post stuff for them, the RCMP, the Coast Guard, BC Ferries, et cetera. So what other partners and stakeholders?
Well, for example, well, first of all, G is specific to public safety information and announcements.
Okay.
H could be a celebration hosted by BIAC. So different functions.
For the library.
For the library.
Trust. Yeah, okay, so that's, because partners and stakeholders weren't necessarily defined. And then on personal use of social media by council and committee members, you deleted and staff.
Because that was covered in the prior point.
So, but staff, but it has to understand that you are bound by obligations of confidentiality and accountability. So, including those you post as a private individual, do not disclose confidential information. So now that staff is left out, they're sort of not now picked up under that second bullet.
I think they would be covered by the earlier point, because this is specifically about personal use of social media, whereas the expectation here is that staff are not going to use in their staff capacity social media.
No, but where are they being covered off that they, their personal use of social media, they can't disclose anything confidential that they've learned.
Under letters of
about.
employment.
Yeah, right, I mean,
So that's
communication.
Okay, that's all I was wanting to. So that wasn't so bad, was it?
No.
Okay,
That was great,
as amended.
as amended.
Yep. All in favor?
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
Now, there is another policy here, which is the public participation policy that Emma took the lead on. So are there questions regarding it?
Yeah. So, under scope, this policy governs when and how public participation is carried out. It applies to municipal staff, contractors, elected or appointed officials, including chairs and members. What about committees, commissions, and, I mean, who are the chairs and members?
Of committees and commissions. About including committee
Yeah.
chairs and members.
Yeah, and there's commissions and work and task forces and, so it was the chairs and members of what? Was basically what I was getting at.
Okay.
So you need committee, commission, I don't,
Okay, got it.
okay. And then 1.2, what's that one? Or advisory, not clear that, okay, this decision-making process. Public means those stakeholders are not typically part of the decision-making entities. So are all our advisory committees part of the decision-making entities?
No,
Okay.
they only make recommendations to council.
Okay. Because then stakeholders are any individual group or political entity with an interest in the outcome. Okay, 2-1. Oh, these came from the Provincial Auditor General or the Auditor General for Local Government, the guiding principles?
Emma, could you respond to that?
Yeah, it's,
Gordon Ruth or?
neither. It's a review of all the different municipalities and the best practices in general.
So that's the Auditor General for Local Government?
But it's not taken, like, verbatim.
No, but you said based on the Auditor General's report. So if it was the Auditor General's report, I would go to the Auditor General, who is a different person from the Auditor General for the local government.
I don't think it's the Auditor General for local government, I think it's the Auditor General.
Who's Carol, it's Carol.
Yeah, it's from under, it was a few months since I've last checked it, but it's not the local government Auditor General.
So it's Carol, not Gordon.
Should we add a citation?
Oh,
A
sorry.
reference?
We could add a citation, yeah, to clarify.
Yeah, well, just check, I guess, that it is.
Yes.
Carol Gordon. Okay, and
Council decisions that involve significant municipal projects or change in plans, policies shall carry out higher levels of public participation. What does changing plans mean?
Changing
Or changing
official
plans,
community plan,
etc.
changing the transportation plan, the parks plan.
So what's
Changing
misleading you
plans.
there is that you're thinking that it should read council decisions that involve significant municipal projects or that change plans, policies, or bylaws?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Change.
and I guess clearing that plans meant transportation plan, cultural master plan, OCPs and.
That change municipal plans, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's good.
Rather than the plan we have today to go for lunch.
Yeah.
You didn't invite me.
Okay, that was it.
Great. Okay, so I would like to recommend that council adopt the public participation policy as amended.
I second that.
All in favor? Unanimous.
Thank you. And thank you for bearing with me and pushing that through. It's just, it needed to be
Yep.
done.
Excellent.
Okay, so, anything to report?
For Metro Vancouver, no. Our last meeting was a lot of housekeeping. Probably the significant thing at the meeting was the board approval on consent of writing to the province and to the feds, recommending that Bowen be considered rural. So
Right.
I
For the,
conveyed
for
that
the
to you.
funding side.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Adams Trust, any reports?
Sure, just a couple of things that are in your package there, 12.12 and 12.13. So this is just advocacy that the Islands Trust is doing regarding anchorages, which are a big problem around the other Gulf Islands. So it just reflects the kind of thing that they come in to help with. And then the last one is one that we took as council to talk to BC Hydro about, which is the net metering. So you'll see that Peter Luckham, the chair of the Islands Trust, has written to BC Hydro saying, what are the principles behind this cap on how much solar energy you can sell back to BC Hydro? Because, and you can read the letter, I just wanted to let you know he followed up. So that's Islands Trust.
Anything from you, Alice?
No, they canceled their financial planning committee meeting.
Well. Okay, business licensing. Who asked for this to be pulled on?
So I just wanted to just raise just one of the comments that have been made. So I mean, I am in favor of moving forward business licensing, as I said in the last meeting. And I was prepared, and I was happy to give it a second meeting, but at that point I still had issues, concerns about the fact that it didn't seem that we communicated through the small businesses the benefits. So that's cropping up again. And also just the concerns from small businesses. And the two issues seem to be sort of a threshold, the impacts on very small businesses and equity, that the smaller businesses seem to have to bear more of a brunt on this than the larger ones. So those are the two things that I was just going to raise on that. So my sort of suggestion would be, you know, improved communication to the benefits to businesses, because I don't think that seems, we don't seem to have, that seems to be coming back as some feedback from the business sector, and also the impacts on small businesses and what we could do perhaps to bring that on board. Because I think what I'm concerned about is compliance. I don't know if we'll have a strong compliance because of this kickback, and which I'm just nervous about would have impacts on what I was hoping was going to be the end result, on end game on this one, was a tool for regulating short-term vacation rentals. So those are my issues I just wanted to raise today.
Just because I think Merlin has written very good short-term vacation rentals. What we see is happening in terms of regulating is the same as 3 other jurisdictions very close to us, Vancouver, Victoria and Tofino, whereby to actually put your property on one of those platforms. In the case of Victoria, as certainly with Airbnb and others are following very fast, you have to actually quote a Vancouver license.
Yeah, and that's why I was supportive of trying to.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say, if you go back to my report, I think seems so long ago now, end of June, early July, I referenced a timeline where this is one of the vehicles for being able to deal with short-term vacation rentals, but we need to first adopt this bylaw as a foundation, but it is important to me that we bring this bylaw forward in a year's time, and we look at, and council has to grapple with the issue of short-term vacation rentals.
Yeah.
And then this would be the tool to help regulate it.
And I fully understand that, and that's why I was prepared to sort of see this go through its journey. However, the little hiccup we seem to be hitting is with the impacts on small businesses, and I don't feel we've yet really kind of dealt with that, considering the amount of feedback we're still getting from small businesses. So that's just what I'm raising today.
Most businesses on Bowen are small
That's
businesses.
right.
Most businesses on Bowen are small businesses. I think the pushback is the ones who are being operated from homes. More than.
I just, to do with this whole thing, and it's been, for something that should have been very simple and happens in every other community, which is what we use templates from, it's not draconian, and I don't know where all the fear came from. It's just, there's so much fear in the community about everything's gonna be shut down, people aren't gonna come to the island, blah, blah. And my problem is that there's a huge communication error here somewhere. And you know, to do with this public participation bylaw that we just started to pass here, that the policy, you know, we didn't do a very good job on that somehow. Because what I'm finding is that the people I talk to, they say, well, I didn't know that, or I didn't know that, oh, there's not gonna be a fee, oh, it's not gonna be registered with Rev Canada, whatever it happens to be. No, we're not out here. It's a tool. So I don't know about moving forward. I think it's great. I think we have to move forward for a lot of reasons. And just this communication piece sort of upsets me, but we have to work harder on that because it wasn't well done.
What would you have suggested we do differently?
You know, I don't.
Sorry.
I don't know. I think with all the feedback we had, maybe we have to go back and have another open house. I don't know how many people attended the first one because I wasn't there. Does anybody have an answer for that?
We weren't there
No.
because we were at UBCM.
This is not a public meeting.
Okay, sorry. How many were, we weren't there?
We were at Whistler, we were all at Whistler talking to ministers.
Yeah, so I don't know what the participation was like there, so I don't know what the feedback was like from there.
I'd like to jump in just for a second.
Sure.
There's absolutely no communication problem.
Oh,
It's a culture problem, right? The people of Bowen Island don't feel we need this. We've gotten on all these years without it. We're a happy little community. We don't have a lot of government in our face, and we like it that way. And the only justification made that really applies to Bowen is data collection for getting grants, for getting funding, for giving proper information, for economic development, for all of that sort of thing. And the people who are opposed to it say, fine, that's your reason. I don't think it's good enough. And that's, I think it's a simple, straightforward disagreement on that basis. But I don't believe that council tried to sell it on the basis of we need to regulate businesses that are operating in the wrong place, that are doing the wrong thing, and we have to check. No regulations have been proposed in any way other than short-term rentals, which are concluded. Right? So anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. I don't believe it's communication because it's been a year. I mean, this has gone around the block.
It's been 2 years.
But
No, I understand that.
I'm going to go to Maureen, Sue Ellen, and then Michael, okay?
Oh, thanks.
Oh, I just wanted to say I'm in support of this bylaw, in spite of the articulate concerns that we've heard from people in the letters and in the public speakers. I don't see any way that the fears are warranted. There's several other things that are here besides just getting data. I think there is when Josie Osborne from Tofino was here, she talked about how we need to be proactive in terms of getting in front of the short-term rental situation, and we need to do the enforcement, and to do that, you have to have the business licenses in place. And short-term rentals can take spaces that would have been long-term rentals, and they can lead to speculation. You want me to hurry up? Okay. I also think there's health and safety issues that could be coming with cannabis or with other kinds of home businesses, and I just think business licenses are a good idea for many reasons. That's why most other municipalities have them, so I'm in support.
Yeah.
Want to say anything on the Michael?
No, we cannot kick this can down any further, but understanding the objections based on, as you said, Bowen's culture.
I'll move it. Okay?
Do we have a seconder? Do we have any further discussion before I call the question? All those in favor? Those opposed? Okay. Business licensing is dealt with. Now, on to docks across beaches. Another perennial favorite.
Yes.
Allison, you asked.
Oh, Daniel's gone home?
Daniel is not at the meeting, but I'm happy to speak.
I have a question.
Okay, so, in reading the report, there is quite the APC report especially, and I think some of the people in the public hearing, there was some comments about the, not liking the drafting and the language, and so basically, the Love's got regulations that were put in place in 2014 that regulate the size of docks and the siting of docks and lot lines that run out into the water. I don't think anybody's actually taken those regulations and looked at the map and a marine chart to see where docks might be built given those regulations, and I think if you did, you'd find there is very limited places. The draft bylaw right now has contradictory wording in it. How does one decide which applies? The phrase physically divide a beach has very different meaning than the phrase that's now in the Love and stays in with this, impede pedestrian access along the beach portion of the portion. And that later wording matches exactly the wording that's in the OCP, and that's why it was put in there. The addition of the words limit or restrict public use of the beach is very, very subjective wording. Who's going to decide what that means? And reading all the different letters in the submissions, the definitions of what a beach means range entirely from the very extensive one that the mayor suggested when we started at the beginning, that a beach is exposed sea bottom, to somebody who thinks that beach is the small cove with the pebbles and the sand. So it's just, I can't go for it the way it's written and interpreted. And Daniel in his report has options for us, and given everything that's come from the APC, and we should be listening to our advisory committees, and the idea of having a map and actually setting out which beaches so it's clear and staff isn't going to have to make a subjective decision, and the council of the day isn't going to make a decision that's totally contrary to one of the council of the previous day. So I think the motion that we should be passing tonight is that council refer bylaw 465 back to staff and request staff to consider the recommendations from the APC and concerns in the public hearing on the bylaw wording and community docks, and come back to council with a report on the recommended process to follow to address the public hearing comments and the recommendations from the APC.
Okay, you want to make that motion?
So I will make that motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Do we have a second? Discussion before I
You
call the
said
question.
bylaw 465, but I think it's 466.
Well, I put down 466, and then I got my glasses out and read Daniel's report, and I thought for sure it said 465.
Okay, just making sure.
It's 466, you're correct. So
Yep.
take that back.
Who's going to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, I have a question for staff really. Look, if this bylaw, and to Alison's point, if this bylaw is passed absolutely as it stands, how do you anticipate processing any applications for docks you might
I had that
receive?
conversation with Daniel today, and when and if council adopts this bylaw, irrespective of the council resolution, I will be asking Daniel to bring a report back to our new council, as he says here, to identify beaches that are and are not appropriate for dock construction with a view to future amendments to WG 1 zone. Daniel is very conflicted by this bylaw, as am I. It's a very subjective bylaw. He does not want to have to make those decisions as staff. And once the bylaw is adopted, we would be bringing forward a report to the next council about how to deal with it.
So, support for my motion, why go through the effort of adopting it and having to change
That's
it?
a council decision, I'm just telling you
Right.
staff perspective.
The reason is, it's taken 4 years to put the 3 words back in that were in the bylaw before that served us well for 15 years or whatever it was. So, yes, I have charts, I wanted to go around, I wanted to define beaches, I wanted to do all of that stuff. Resources weren't available to do that. There were certain people on council who thought we had a lot of other more important things that we should be doing with our time. So in consultation with our legal counsel, we decided this is an 80% bylaw. No, it's not perfect, but it takes us a long way, and once it is a bylaw, then it will be looking at further amendments to further clarify it in the future, which is just fine with me. Sir, you want to speak to this?
Sure, I just wanted to bring people's attention to on-table items 3.4A and 3.4B, which I had put together, because I had a couple of questions come in by email, and I had the files open anyway. So 3.4A is the text of the so they're side by side. In the first column, the past 2002 version is where physically divided beach was used. And then in the current 2013 version, you can see it's absent. And then in the proposed second reading of the bylaw, which is what I had at the time when I made this, is putting it back. And any other changes there? The one that you mentioned, Councillor Morse, the limit or restrict public use of the beach. You'll see that limit use of was also there in the past, in 2002. Mm-hmm. And it's also something that Daniel told us in his report, that is a statute, it's part of the lease requirement that the province has anyway, as why it was back in there. The second table, so I just wanted to say it's not new. It did serve us well for the 10 years, I guess, between 2002 and 2013, when the new bylaw came through. And during that time, no docks were built that physically divided the beach, but lots of other docks were built. And so it has a track record of being workable. The second table, the one that says Table 1 on it, 3.4B, these are 3 dock applications that would have physically divided Pebbly Beach. And this is where the wording, shall not divide a beach, came from, according to my files. The 2 top ones there were back in 2001. These were in the run-up to becoming a municipality. So this is when the land use bylaw was being prepared. And both those long beaches were not supported, so the council didn't give the lease. And then the third one there is the one in 2008. There was an application. And under the wording of shall not physically divide a beach, and all the other things, it wasn't supported either. So just that there are long beach applications for long docks that could divide a beach that have not passed up by the wording that came from the community, from the neighborhoods. So I just wanted to introduce these, so that it's there for people if you want to refer to them. I'm in support of the draft bylaws down on the page.
And I'd like to point out that those docks would not have been able to have been built once the new regulations regarding docks were passed in 2014.
That's not my argument, it's just that long docks, it's where the wording came from.
Do we have a resolution on the table?
Yes.
Yes, we
Can
have
we read it again?
Allison's motion on it.
It's up here.
Allison's motion.
Okay.
No.
Or sorry, no, there's Allison's motion is on the table now.
Yes, and I wonder if it wouldn't hurt just to reread it out.
Can you pop it up?
No, it's logistically, I'm allowed, so that's right.
Tyler's got it, so, but
We don't
fix
need
my
it.
typo.
Maybe Tyler.
I did fix the typo.
I didn't think it would hurt just to reread your motion again.
So Tyler's gonna read it.
Did you read it, Tyler?
Yes. That council refer bylaw 466 back to staff and request staff to consider the recommendations from the APC and concerns from the public hearing on the bylaw wording and community docs, and come back to council with a report on a recommended process to follow to address the public hearing comments and the recommendations from the APC.
Okay.
All in favor?
Oh, well, wait a second.
Well, you want to speak to it now?
Yes, I
Okay,
do.
sorry, go
I'm
ahead.
just saying, in view of what I heard from our CAO, to put our people and to mandate a future council change and put our people, our planners in a difficult position, I just find unconscionable, and I certainly do support that motion.
Okay.
I just want to be clear, I didn't say it would be putting staff in a difficult position. We will be reporting
Going
back to
back,
council
yeah.
for clarity.
Okay, so all in favor of Allison's motion? And those opposed? Okay, the motion is defeated. Now we'll move to the main motion.
I'll move, go ahead.
So this, I would also want, I want to introduce some discussion about the staff discussion part of the report and that of community doc. And I would like to move the suggested amendment to 2A, because I think this does address some of the issues that were brought forward at the public hearing.
Isn't this a proclamation? This is our final.
Yeah, but it says that it's to do with
Daniel's
citing.
report.
In the report, it says that it's citing and that we can put it in at this point because it doesn't.
Yeah, this amendment would be a change to a citing regulation in the bylaw not in use, and so would be able to be made by council following the close of the public hearing. Should council wish to make this change, staff recommend the following motion.
Yes, and that was what I wanted to put on the floor as a proposed amendment, because then we can still adopt it. But we had issues. What was brought up at the public hearing was a proposed community dock at Seymour Bay, and I think this deals with that issue where I've had issue with, so I would like to move that.
It's a different water district. It's not a WG one.
It would be a commercial dock area.
It's commercial, it's
No,
commercial.
It's not.
But this is for public docks. This would allow public docks.
Well, it's not part of WG one.
Well, everything's WG1.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's WG1.
Yep.
Sorry, Melanie.
I thought
You're right.
I thought it was
It's
separate.
WG1.
No.
It would have to become WG2 to put in the kind of dog that they're talking, sorry. But anyway,
However,
go ahead.
so I would like to move that amendment.
Susan.
So how about, I move the recommendation motion, and then how about if it goes like this? That bylaw number 466, 2018, cited as Bowen Island Municipality Land Use Bylaw 57, 2002, amendment bylaw number 466, 2018, be read a third time, with the amendment to section 2.
A.
Oh, sorry, that's 465.
This one is 465.
Right.
Bylaw number 465.
Where is 465 on our,
We're not passing 465.
It's 466.
466.
I think he just has a bylaw number
Oh,
on.
is that
Okay.
the number on?
yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, section 2 of bylaw
That's not-
466, to read, this is what confused Allison, yes. That the words, except for community docks which may physically divide a beach, be added to the end of A.
And then what I liked about this is that above E, there is clarification that a community dock is a public dock.
Yeah. And that bylaw number 466, 2018 be reconsidered and finally adopted. This I move.
Can we just take a moment to read what is in the bylaw and make sure we're certain about what is being changed here? Because the preamble in the bylaw itself already states community dock. And from my reading, the only change that is being made to section 2 of the bylaw is that change in point A.
Adding in except for community docks.
Which may physically
divide
divide
a
a
beach.
beach. So
Or-
that's the
no.
only change.
However, the dock at Seymour Bay wasn't going to physically divide the beach. It's going to be up against the
side.
The side.
I think
This is-
Seymour Bay
This is
is-
not specific to Seymour Bay.
Ignore
But
Seymour
I
Bay.
think that's the
We
only
had
community dock that we're contemplating near a beach.
No, I would like to suggest that any
Careful what you wish
beach, if a group of neighbors, like
I
they
know
are
I
at
go
Eagle
across
Cliff,
Dudley Beach all of a sudden, and we would have just approved it. we would have just amended the bylaw to make that possible for that dock on Pebbly with the big long dock to go back in.
Oh, that's why I wanted my motion.
You see, that's why it's not, it's a bigger implication than you think by
Yeah.
saying that a community dock can now physically divide a beach.
Because
Because there's other places on the island where you really don't want that. And to amend this now at this point, if there's specific wording around Seymour Bay, that's fine. But I think that if someone's gonna put in a big dock that's gonna take water taxes to the city, it should be rezoned anyway.
It will be rezoned, yeah.
Yeah, and once it's rezoned, it's gonna be out of WG1, and this bylaw is not going to apply to it.
Correct.
I take your point that this has broader implications.
Yeah. So I really like to not do that generally. Not that I'm opposed to a dock at Seymour Bay.
Can I ask staff, wouldn't it be that if a group of neighbors, let's say the Deep Bay Neighborhood Association, should there be one, wanted to put in a community dock, they could come and ask for a rezoning?
Yeah, of course.
They could, yeah, but I can't answer the specifics of it, but yes.
No, but they
Yeah,
could
of course.
approach council
This is-
and ask for, and there would be a community use agreement or whatever, and all that kind of stuff, so the option would still exist. Okay.
Yeah. This doesn't preclude it forever and ever. It just has to come back before our council to be approved on a case-by-case basis. Or something, yeah.
So,
I get it.
so where is Melanie's suggested amendment?
Is-
Was it moved and seconded, Tyler?
No.
No.
No. So, do you still wish?
I'm going to move it.
Okay, I can't second it. Does anyone want to second it?
So you're gonna make the motion that Daniel suggested in his report?
No.
Yes, yes.
What? No, Daniel, it's good that after we've made the bylaw, Daniel is going to look at this to
No.
bring further clarity in
No,
the future.
council may wish to consider a minor amendment to bylaw 466 so the community dock would be allowed to be sited over a beach. This amendment would be a change to siting regulation not to use, and so would be able to be made by council following the close of the public hearing. Should council wish to make this change, staff recommend the following motion. The council amend section 2 of bylaw 466 to read, any community dock, private mortgage facility, or group mortgage facility shall be located such that it will not, A, physically divide a beach, except for community docks which may physically divide a beach.
Oh, yeah, well, no, that's the point, because that's what we don't want.
Well, that's Melanie's motion, and I'll second it.
We already have one on the table?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Where is it?
Wow, there's much broader implications here than.
But that's what we heard back, and that's, we had an issue with private, so that, to me, isn't acceptable.
If one person in one location for one specific reason, but this amendment now covers the entire island for anybody that can call it a community dock. And once you can call it a community dock, because it's more than one
But it has to
owner,
be a public dock, though.
right? So they'll say, yeah, you can use our dock. And Joe and I are gonna put in a dock, and it's right between our two properties, and if the other people wanna walk out on the dock, they can.
Land use bylaw defines community dock as a public dock.
Yeah, so it just means that anybody, but just because they let other people use it, doesn't mean that we want that dock on the beach.
If I may give an example, at the public hearing a couple of years ago, Don Ho spoke at the public hearing about turning one of the docks into a community dock. So
Right.
that's to,
Right.
for your,
So that would mean that if they now came back and said, yes, we're gonna put it right down the Pebble Beach at Cape Roger Curtis, but it's going to be public.
But you can't, because we,
only have.
Okay, because we have specifically excluded it. But you see what
Anywhere
I'm
else.
getting at? Any place else on the
Anywhere
island you could do it, if we adopted that amendment. And it being at this late date, I feel very comfortable with passing this not amended, and letting Daniel and the planning department now go back to work on it for further refinement in the next term. But if we don't pass this, then this is going to get thrown back and never done again. I believe me, I've worked on it for 4 years, I can tell you. So I think that really, really ill-advised amendment to, for what we're
So
trying to
you've got a
accomplish.
mover and a second.
She's got a mover and seconder.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of Melanie motion?
Pass.
Those opposed?
I'd like that recorded, please.
Yeah.
They always do
Yes,
record as
record.
a minority.
Record our votes.
Sure you don't want to go back to my motion then?
Yeah, makes a lot of
Now,
sense.
okay, back to the main motion, the recommendation, the bylaw, whether it's 465 or 466, dogs across beaches, be read a third time and adopted.
As amended,
Uh,
a third time as amended.
As amended by that, yes.
And that bylaw 466, 2018 be reconsidered and finally adopted.
Correct.
Yes. Do I have someone to move that? And, no? We don't want bylaw 466, we're gonna let this whole thing die and go back to not having any bylaw against docks across beaches?
I'll move it.
Yes. Okay, any more discussion before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, those opposed? Okay, and that bylaw is carried. That motion's carried. Okay.
Take a picture of Roman's face.
Saturday.
3.5, bus shelter. Look at the bright side, nobody's happy.
Collective misery.
We listened.
Yes?
3.5, bus shelter, who wanted that one pulled?
Sue Ellen,
Sorry?
bus shelter?
Oh, yeah. I wanted this one pulled because in your package, you will find on table item 3.5A, this is a letter from the librarian. The library board would like to request that decisions or agreements regarding the location, size, and design of the proposed bus shelter, it's the one that looks like this, has a little drawing on the back. Okay. The library board would like to request that decisions or agreements regarding the location, size, and design of the proposed bus shelter formally be included in the library's input and consultation approval process, because this hasn't come to the library board. Or the chief librarian hasn't been asked formally for her input. The proposed collaborative project services agreement on the agenda, I think it's because it's the first time something like this is happening with the Cove Commons agreement and all that kind of thing, but it doesn't include any reference to the library in the process of approvals or design in this collaborative project services agreement.
I would suggest that we not embed that into the agreement itself, as the library is part of the municipality. We could pass a resolution to the effect that the library be consulted.
Yeah, okay, because there's a bunch of different issues that have emerged, and I think if we, okay, that I move that the consultation process be formalized in any agreements to ensure the library's continued participation, something like that.
I would speak against formalizing it in the agreement,
Right.
because they are considered part of Bowen Island
You just
municipality.
told me this, I'm sorry, it's
Yeah,
after
no,
10.
just, that council directs staff to include the library board in any consultation for the bus stop.
The chief librarian and the library board, and then consultation for the, she's on the library board. Yeah, okay, that's good, thank you.
Okay,
I have a couple of questions.
okay.
So, it's the point 2 of BIM's role, it says BIM agrees to apply for external funding. It doesn't say translate funding.
No.
So is there any intention, if we don't get the translate funding, are we gonna be on a treadmill for applying for grants, or is that one application and that's it?
I don't think we're obligated to succeed in funding, so it's just.
No, but I do get Allison's point. I think this was one of the constraints with getting this forward quickly is the translate grant funding.
So do we want to say external funding and list that type of funding out? Or-
Well, my concern is if we don't get the TransLink
Yeah.
funding, then is BIAC going to expect us to apply for other grants?
Yes.
And how much staff time does it take to
I
write a
agree.
grant application?
Yes, I agree.
Can I mean, there was a whole bunch of other issues, and I'm assuming that by whatever that motion was that I didn't capture, that if we move and past that, then it goes back to collect the library's consultation, right? Because there's a whole bunch of other things, input that we can have about the collaboration agreement and the size of the building, and I've looked at the TransLink bus shelters criteria, and they say transparent, because that's what they all are in the city, because of safety and also so people can see the buses, but young women don't go into big dark bus shelters. And there's a whole bunch of reasons about it blocking the entranceway to the libraries and lots of things. So can I move that motion? And,
Yeah, what I would suggest, because I do have some issues with the agreement itself, because I just looked at it just before the meeting tonight, is one of the drivers with this is applying for transit funding by the end of the month, is that correct? Can, Emma, without this collaborative agreement in place, can you go ahead and apply for the funding? So maybe it's as simple as council directing staff to apply for transit funding for
a
that.
bus shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would move that, that council direct staff to do what you just said, and apply for funding, translate funding for a bus shelter. Yes, I move this, yes.
Yes.
And that
That's it.
library
Let's just-
consultant.
No, let's
Yes.
just,
No,
well, let's just
we're
do
just gonna
it
apply for the
simple.
funding of this motion. This is a motion to apply for funding for TransLink. If we don't get the funding, the whole thing's moved anyway.
But the collaborative,
We're not dealing with the collaborative agreement. we're just
No, but
approving
I
the
do
funding.
like Sue Ellen's resolution that, I think we adopt the one that we ask Emma to
Yes.
apply for the funding, but I think as a sign of goodwill, we do also want to say to the library, we're going to involve you with this.
Okay, well, I'd like to make it just two separate.
Yes, and I think she has
Yeah.
those two separate motions.
yeah.
Okay.
So what does my other motion say there, Tyler?
No, but we've got the first one, which we haven't voted on yet,
Yeah, let's do the
which has
funding.
been moved and seconded, for
That's
the
good.
funding.
Okay,
I'm just confused.
and all in favor of applying for TransLink for funding?
Yes.
Okay, so that's passed unanimous.
Okay.
So we have a second motion that,
That council directs staff to include the library in any consultation regarding the Cobb bus shelter.
okay, do
Including-
we have someone to move that?
Yeah.
And a seconder? Okay, all in favor of that one?
Could I suggest an amendment to
Yes.
take the any consultation out of it?
Just consultation?
Consultation.
Yeah.
There'll be all sorts of
Friendly
consultations.
amendment.
The library doesn't need to be involved in all of them.
Okay, moved and seconded with.
Any consultation on library lands or on
But it's
land?
No.
not, see, my issue is it's not library lands, it's
Yeah.
municipal.
Yeah, I just want the library to be consulted.
Yes.
They will be, that's the
So
motion.
include the
Okay.
library and
All right.
consultation about the bus shelter.
Sorry, the
Yes.
gears are slipping a little
Yeah,
bit.
mine are-
It's
Okay.
10 after 10.
All in favor, passed unanimously, thank you.
Adjourned, that's unanimously.
Okay, so we'll deal with the policy of the agreement at the next meeting? 'Cause
I think so, I can sit down with Emma and
Yeah.
we're forward to the
Please.
second.
Okay, so that policy.
Emma has to leave?
I
Deferred.
have to run to catch the last ferry.
Oh, okay.
I know there was a closed schedule for 9:30.
Yes.
It's like, I'm
Um,
not sure, how does that work?
Well, I think you
Can we
need to
throw
get
you
up
out?
here.
Yes.
We're adjourned and we're going into
Yeah,
the
but-
closed meeting to, oh, so you have to run right this minute.
Well,
Yeah.
is it not, is it
Sorry.
pulling
I'll-
this?
didn't even realize I was doing first name. So, okay, the business license thing. And by the way, having seen you guys do this all evening, I'm really appreciative that you didn't do these jobs. Is there some opportunity in the future to nuance this a bit with like a threshold or a type, not lumping in people making knitted hats with people running big hundreds of $1,000 businesses? This one really got to me, and I'm not even implicated in any way, but anyway, I would like to hope there's an opportunity to not have it be such a big, huge, open-ended statement.
I can answer that?
Great.
Staff have committed to this coming back to council within a year to see how it's working, including things that are working and aren't working. We'll have a better idea of how many businesses apply for business licensing, how many are in contravention. So yes, this is a living bylaw. It will be tweaked as it goes along.
Okay, great, thanks.
We're not out to hurt anybody.
No. That's a great question.
And now that you know exactly how municipal council works, we'll see you again in another decade.
I have watched some, you know, on the.
Wow.
We won't ask you
Thank
to
you
stay
for coming.
away.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it was actually a very interesting evening. I have to say, I sometimes spent elsewhere on my phone.
Thanks, Teresa. Bye-bye.
And you're adjourned.
We are adjourned.